Well, we're live. Excellent. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Gretsch Guitars Takeover Day here in the Andertons famous online realm. It's going to be exciting, I think. It's going to be a good fun few hours. It's a great honor, of course, for us to be allowed on here and to take over Andertons social media platforms for a few hours. So thank you, Leanton, the captain, and his splendid team. Yeah, great to be here. Great to be here. My name's Adam Bowden-Smith. I'm the Gretsch Guitars product manager for Europe, Middle East and Africa. I'm based here. I'm in my home here at sunny southeast England. I'll be your host for this Gretsch Takeover Day. Don't worry though, it's not all me. You're not going to have to look at my face all day. We have some great guests coming up later. Some video content. Looking at some cool new Gretsch stuff. And yeah, don't forget to click like and subscribe on the videos you're watching and hit that notifications bell to show you're enjoying it. And throughout all the various videos today, we'll be answering your questions that you can send through on the comments section here. So do please pop any questions you'd like to have answered in there, and we'll try and get around to them. So the schedule for today is going to be starting now. I'm going to be talking to you for a little while about various new products and other bits and pieces about Gretsch guitars. Later on, there'll be videos coming up. So we'll have at around 4:45 or so, there'll be posted the first video from the Andertons guys. The captain and Danish Pete will be looking at various the new products that we have launched so far this year. So the first one about 4:45 is going to be the Gretsch Professional Collection. They'll be looking at the new gear there. Then at 5 p.m. I'll be talking to Rabea Massaad, and we'll be having a chat about his thoughts on Gretsch. Looking forward to that. It's going to be great. Then around 5:45, the captain and Pete will be back with some of the new products from our Electromatic collection. 6 p.m. roughly, we shall have beaming in from the Gretsch HQ in America. We'll have Jason Barnes, who's the vice president of Gretsch Guitars, and we'll be looking with him at some of the history and the legacy of Gretsch. And maybe some sneaky insights into some behind-the-scenes things, answering your questions and having a general chit-chat about our love of Gretsch guitars and why you should love them too, of course. 6:45, the Dynamic Duo are back with looking at the new products from our streamliner collection. So those videos will be over on other parts of the Andertons channel, so you can drop over and look at them, or you can wait till after the takeover is happening and watch them at your leisure. And again, hit those like and subscribe buttons. Then at the end of the event, we'll be at 7 p.m. The captain will be meeting with Gretsch artist Richard Fortus from Guns N' Roses, no less. So that's going to be really exciting. Looking forward to that. And then after that, I'll just be saying a little goodbye, answering any other questions you may have left over at the end there. And that's the run of the day so far. So it's going to be a fun few hours coming up. Hope you're looking forward to it as much as I am. Yeah, so as I said, there'll be videos coming up from the Andertons guys elsewhere on the channel looking at the new products. So they'll be starting off with the professional collection. So let's just give you a quick overview of what's going to be coming up there. So with the professional collection in Gretsch, just a quick reminder for those of you who perhaps don't know how the collection is split out into sort of sub-series. We have the overall, the professional collection is kind of the flagship range of Gretsch guitars, of course. We have just above them, the super flagship range, if you like, is the custom shop stuff that comes out of the USA. Very few of them, very exclusive models. But For the general production instruments, our flagship models we call the Professional Collection, made in Japan. And they are split basically into three subsections, which is the Vintage Select series, which is what you might know as being a reissue guitar. So they are assigned a particular year, and they have specs, you know, that are faithful to that year from our historic past. A lot of them, you know, based on those famous 50s and 60s guitars. Then the next subsection is the Player's Edition range, which is essentially the modern Gretsch, or the modern player has quite a few of the sort of tweaks that you might expect to find for the demands of today's players, such as locking tuners, Graphtec nut, those sort of things. We'll talk about them a little bit later. And then the third section is the artist models, which of course are signature models with the specs according to what the signature artist has either asked for or what maybe a famous artist from the past has traditionally used, maybe a sort of tribute to their famous guitar. So with the new products that you're going to see in the Andertons video later, there's basically couple of guitars from for the Vintage Select range, and then a couple of guitars in the Player's Edition range. In the Player's Edition range, we have some new jet models. I mean, they're all jet models actually, but the Player's Edition ones are the BT jets. BT meaning the Broadtron pickups that they're equipped with. And these new BT jets have a Bigsby equipped on them. Previously, all BT jets were equipped with a hardtail. So these new ones have the Bigsby on them. They're gold plated. They have some lovely colors, three new colors: Cadillac green, well, not new colors, but new for this range of guitars: Cadillac green, walnut stain, and midnight sapphire. And differently on these particular jets, they have that color all over the body and all up the back of the neck. Traditionally on a Gretsch jet, you'd have the color on the top and then a natural back and sides. So this just gives a little variance on that aesthetic. And then we also will be seeing the Vintage Select jets, which we've released. I happen to have one here, so I can point at things and show you the prettiness of them. This is a silver sparkle one, rather beautiful. So this is part of the Vintage Select range, and this is an 89 jet. So as Lee, the captain, alludes to later in the video, the 80s are officially now vintage. Sorry to make some of you feel a little old about that, but that's how it is. So this is based on the 89 model. Gloss finish all over, including the neck. Just to answer that question there, so is the gloss neck at the back. And this is based on, as I said, the 89 model. So this has all the specs you'd find from that era. And some of you may be questioning why we're doing something which is what seems relatively recent year. And the reason is it's basically, this is what you might call a pre-Fender model, or the Gretsch, the Fred Gretsch era model. So when Fred Gretsch took over the Gretsch company in the early 80s, he ran it himself until the early noughties, when Fender took over running the manufacture and marketing of Gretsch. And so they had certain features on them at that time which were different to anything we do now or anything that had been done in the sort of golden era of the 50s and 60s. One of those big things would be this headstock shape. A lot of you may remember this headstock shape from that era, from the 80s and early 90s. It's quite different to most other jets in that it's slightly wider. Most jets have these narrower headstock on them. This one also has the hump block inlays on the rosewood fretboard. It's got the Electromatic bridge on the wood base, because that's what they had moved to in the 80s. It's got a slightly thinner body than the vintage guitars. Oops. And this particular one has this beautiful silver sparkle finish. It's also available with a gold sparkle and in what I have called in previous Andertons videos, traditional black. So it's just a black top, the classic Eurojet look with the black top and the natural back and sides. As with all jets, it's chambered. So it's a solid mahogany back, which has been routed out to be chambered. So lots of hollow areas in there. So a lot of air moving inside, which is part and parcel of the Gretsch sound. We like to have a lot of air move inside the guitar for the big full sound. As with all vintage Select instruments, this one is equipped with TV Jones pickups. In this case, it's a TV Classic at the neck and a Classic Plus at the bridge, so you get a bit more output from the bridge. Because, I mean, this guitar is from that era of the sort of the grunge kind of Detroit sound coming out of that part of America where they were really hammering out some fat riffs on these sort of guitars. And so that Classic Plus really just gives you that little extra oomph on the bridge position there. Again, classic Gretsch control layout. Got the master volume on the horn here. And then we have the volume per pickup here, and the master tone, and then a selector switch. Really versatile setup because you can balance the volume of the two pickups and then find your sweet spot and then leave it, and then you can just adjust the volume up and down. Just going to try and adjust my microphone quickly. I'm told it's slightly peaking, so just find that, if I can find that here somewhere. As with all our vintage Select guitars, what we have is a philosophy of vintage where vintage makes sense. So there are a couple of hidden features within there which are not necessarily true to the era of the reissue. So in this case, the 89, but they make them a much more playable guitar. So for example, the bridge, the floating bridge is pinned. It has two little grub screws underneath, which means it won't slide about under your palm. I mean, if you took all the strings off, the bridge would still come off like a floating bridge. But the point is, when you're actually rocking out with it and hard strumming, the bridge is not going to slide about, and that's true on all our guitars that we make now, which are fitted with a floating bridge. And also medium jumbo frets, and also it's got a treble bleed on the master volume. So when you turn that master volume down, you don't lose any highs. So microphone there. Advanced sound options. Sorry about this, just adjusting the volume here. Hopefully, I'll turn that down a bit, so hopefully that's a little bit better. Okay, sorry about that. Yeah, so the master volume has the treble. So those little extra features are sort of hidden, so they don't detract from the vintage look of the instrument, but they just make it a much better playing experience. So as I say, that's the Vintage Select 89 Jet, available in those three colors. And the Captain and Danish Pete will be going through them in the next video after this introduction. After that, the next Andertons video to be launched will be about the Electromatic collection. So we have some new additions to our center block range of Electromatics, which means the center block meaning, of course, that it has it's a semi-hollow guitar with F-holes. It has a spruce center block down the middle of and again in the effort of our great Gretsch sound, having all that air moving around, even on our center blocks, that is chambered as well. So the center block has chambering within it, so there's more air moving around, and of course gives a little bit of weight relief there, which is really cool. So but the main change to some of the new models that we're releasing in the Electromatic center block range is that we've introduced the non-Bigsby version. So it has the now iconic V stop tailpiece that we feature on our non-Bigsby guitars, or many of our non-Bigsby guitars. And that's available in three cool new colors: Bristol Fog, Aged Walnut Stain, and a lovely black gold, which you'll see in the video, which is great to see in the video because it's quite a subtle finish. It looks black in some lights, but it has kind of gold dust within the paint. So as you move it around, it has some lovely shimmering aesthetic to it. Really beautiful color. And then we have added to our Bigsby equipped range as well, with just a couple of new finishes there. Speyside, which, as the Captain talks about later, is a an allusion to a whiskey variety. So that Speyside is kind of an amber finish for your amber nectar. And he was also trying to remember the other whiskey relevant finish that we have, which is just for his information, is as a single barrel. And there's a single barrel burst that we do on this new model, and we also have a single barrel stain elsewhere in Gretsch ranges, in the Streamliner range. Just to a little bit of a nod to the amber nectar, as I say. So those two are additional to the existing lineup. The basic specs of them being they all have the black top Broadtron pickups, meaning that the top of the pickups is missing the little tangs. So a regular Filtertron has the metal all the way through here. The black top, the middle bits are missing, so you have the black showing all the way across, which is an aesthetic and design that harks back to the 70s era of Gretsch, and their Broadtron pickups as well. So as I said earlier, the Pro Series had the Broadtron pickups on as well, and the black tops are essentially the Electromatic version of the Broadtron pickups. I suppose a quick explanation of what the Broadtron pickups are is they are a wider coil width than on the regular Filtertron. So while the Filtertron has the extreme, it's much more focused in a way and has a brighter sound because of the narrower coils. The Broadtron is a wider coil, so has a slightly fuller, fatter sound to it, more akin to a traditional humbucker, but still with the clarity, the fidelity that Gretsch are famous for. We didn't want to lose our signature tone, but also broaden the range of sonic options that are available to you. So that's the Broadtron pickup. And then the last video from the Captain and Danish Pete will be on the Streamliner collection. So a few new models, possibly the ones I'm most excited about, actually. This Streamliner collection, we've added a range of center block Streamliners. If you're familiar with the Streamliner range, it's kind of our entry level into initially hollow bodies and center blocks, and then additionally recently solid bodies. But we've expanded the center block range into these beautiful things. So this is the 2622-P90. The P90 referring to the style of pickup rather than specifically this pickup, because this pickup is called the Fidelisonic 90. The 90 obviously referring to the P90 element of the design of this. And the Captain talks about in the video later, he talks about the historical significance of the staple top P90, which you'll hear about later, and he has everything spot on there. The only thing I would add is that these, while they are initially based on a staple top P90, and the staple refers to the rectangular pole pieces as opposed to circular pole pieces that you're probably used to. These are based kind of on that as a starting point, but these pickups are absolutely designed from the ground up by Gretsch for these guitars specifically. So a staple P90 is very similar in tone to a regular P90 in that it's like a fat single coil, but the staple slugs on there really give you a little bit of extra top end, a little bit of extra brightness to that sound. So that's kind of our starting point. And then we took the sonic signature of our Dynasonic pickups, which is Gretsch's traditional single coil pickup that we started using back in the early 50s. And then we took that sonic signature and sort of engineered that into here as well. They're about the same output as a regular P90, maybe a touch lower, but about the same. They're pretty powerful. For single coil pickups, they're pretty powerful. They pack a punch, believe me. You'll be able to hear that in the video later on. And so we took the Dynasonic signature, sort of melded that in there, and then of course, as I said earlier, we don't want to lose the classic Gretsch fidelity, that clarity of tone, the string-to-string definition that we are famous for. So we engineered that into there as well. Combine all that together, and you get what I think is a really great single coil pickup. I'm biased because I am a fan of single coil pickups anyway, but They just sound great. They're super fat, but they have punch. They have crystalline top end, but with never gets too piercing. Cutting, but not piercing. That fine line before it hurts your ears. It's pleasing to the ears. It never gets to hurt your ears. Just a really great sound. This is that iconic V-stop tailpiece I was talking about. And there's also versions available with the Bixby. Other new features on this compared with the regular Streamliner is these have a Sapele body. And so you can see that really beautiful grain that Sapele gives you with those stripes. And a NATO neck, which the other Streamliners have as well. Both those woods are sort of cousins, if you like, of mahogany. So you can imagine the tonality of the mahogany sound applied to this concept. And again, as I said, with that is to say, it'll be slightly warmer, have a slightly warmer sound to it than the maple, which is much brighter. And then, as I say, they have all our center block models have the spruce center block that goes down the middle there, and then it's chambered. There's a bit cut out around there, and it's quite heavily chambered under the pickups as well, keeping the solid bit, of course, to anchor the bridge and the tailpiece. Another really nice little feature I like on these, a little detail, is these new knobs that we created for these. They're like sort of old radio knobs. They have this cream plastic on the outside and then this little metal insert on the top with the arrow, just a nice pleasing little detail. And the cream matches the cream surrounds on the pickups there. We've popped in these little oval inlays because everyone does round dots, so let's do ovals just to mix things up a bit. Just a really cool looking guitar, really great sounding, and being in the Streamliner range, really affordable as well. Just a really great price point on these models. They are available in that format, which is a 16-inch wide body, and they're also available in the junior format. You might see the junior moniker on various Gretsch guitars. Doesn't mean it's a beginner's guitar or it's for children or anything. All it refers to is the size of the body. So from 16 inches, the junior guitar goes down to 14 inches, which is really great for those people who maybe want to get the look, vibe, and tonality of a hollow or semi-hollow guitar, but are maybe used to a solid body guitar and just can't manage the bigger size. Those junior models are really good for that. We aim to just manage a bit more ergonomically if you're used to that kind of thing. Or if you're of smaller stature, of course, that's another factor there. They're all available with or without Bixby, in various color schemes, and they feature yes, a Fidelity 90 pickup, and yeah, there's various different colors, lots of new bursts, and the Bixby equipped junior models have the double. We've gone for the two-tone finish, which is something that Gretsch do quite frequently on various guitars. Have the top one color and back and sides a natural finish. So that looks really cool. I've been talking. Oh no! Just before I get onto that, there's one other new Streamliner model that the Captain and Pete are looking at later, which is the G2410T, which is a new addition to our range of hollow bodies. So the regular hollow body model is called the 2420, and this one's a 2410. The 10 in this case refers to the fact that the body depth is slightly narrower or shallower, if you like. So a regular Gretsch hollow body would be 2 3/4 inches, and the 2410s and indeed the rat rods over in the Electromatic world that you guys might have seen already, we launched last year, they have the slightly shallower 2 1/4 inch depth. So it's only 1/2 inch difference, but it might not sound like much, but once you get them into your hands, you'll really notice that difference in the depth. And it does make a significant difference to the tonality of the guitars as well. The shallower guitars have a little bit more focus in their sound, whereas the deeper guitars are fuller, more sort of as you'd expect from a hollow body. And those guitars are equipped with the BT2S pickups, BT meaning Broadtron. So as you mentioned earlier, so we have the Broadtron pickups at all levels, a Streamliner version, Electromatic version, and the Pro Series version. So the BT2S Broadtron 2 refers to the fact that the Streamliner 2410 and S also means Streamliner. Why not? So I've been mentioning a lot of these part numbers here, these model numbers, and you'll hear the model numbers bandied about in various videos, and I thought it might be worth just running down a really quick explanation of what these model numbers actually mean. I know there can be some confusion out there, and to be fair, in the professional series, which is very much based on our historical legacy, it can get quite confusing. But in Electromatic and Streamliner world, it's relatively straightforward. There's always going to be exceptions, of course. I find myself, when I'm explaining various historical or spec elements about Gretsch, I'm always then saying except, and then going off on a tangent and talking about something else. But broadly, here's how it works. So you have 4 numbers. So we'll talk about the 2410, for example. So G2410T. The 4 numbers in the middle, the G just means Gretsch. The 4 numbers in the middle work out like this. The first number means the series. So 2 streamliners, 5 Electromatics, and actually, for the most part, 6 professional collection. The second number refers to the construction of the guitar. So a 2 would be a solid body, a 4 would be a hollow body, and a 6 would be a center block. So, for example, this model is a 2622, so that's streamliner center block. The fourth number is kind of a wildcard number. It refers to variances on a regular theme. So, for example, in that 2410 model, the 1 there just means there is a variance in the regular spec, and in that case, it's a shallower body. And then the last number refers to the number of cutaways, 1 or 2. So the 0 means it's got 1 cutaway, and a 2 means it's got 2 cutaways. So again, 2622 means streamliner 2, center block 6, and then 22 in this case is the double cutaway. Variances on those numbers you could have at the end. You could have a 55, for example, which means the junior model. So the streamliner the 2655 is the center block junior from streamliner. And another example, the 5420 is one of our best-selling models, the 5420. So 5 Electromatic, 4 hollow body, and 20 single cutaway. So yeah, it's a little bit complicated. I hope that kind of makes sense. Then you have the numbers after, the letters after them, of course. If you have a T, it means trem system equipped. In our case, almost always a Bigsby. I think always a Bigsby. And then sometimes you'll see a G on there that refers to gold hardware. Sometimes you'll see an LTD, which means that it's a limited edition model. And sometimes you'll see an LH, which is for your southpaws. It's left-handed guitars. So that's a quick rundown of those numbers. I don't think I've missed anything important about those. I could do a really quick rundown of the Pro Series. I'm not going to get too in depth because it does get quite complicated. But in the Pro Series, the historical, we still kind of mainly use historical model numbers for the Pro Series. For example, the 6120 is the Nashville or Chet Atkins hollow body. The 6136 is the Falcon. 6118 is the Anniversary, and so forth. And back in the day, they did kind of have a sort of logic to them. So they were roughly in price point order. So the 6118, the Anniversary, was at the time the sort of entry-level model because it had hardly any binding on it. It was aesthetically very simple. And then you had the 6119, which was the then called the Tennessean, now called the Tennessee Rose, which had a little bit more binding, a little bit more aesthetic upgrades to it. And then you had the 6120. So 6118, 1920, and the 6120 is the orange one you see behind me here, probably one of the most famous Gretsch models. Had all the binding on the F-holes and everything, and the bright orange, distinctive orange color and so forth. Of course, the variances a lot of the time referred to the color. So a 6117, for example, was an anniversary in a different color. And then you get higher up, you get up to the 6136, which was the flagship model, the Falcon. Got one back there, which was kind of they advertised it as the most expensive guitar in the world back in the 50s. So it was really up there as their flagship model. And yeah, so that was the basics. But then, of course, it gets more complicated because you have the 6196 is a higher number, a country club, but it wasn't actually a higher price point than the Falcon. And then you move into the solid bodies. You get the 6128, which is the classic duo jet in traditional black. And then you get that guitar in various different colors. 6129 was the silver jet. 6130 was the red jet in the Firebird red. 6131 was the Roundup in the orange with the sort of Western appointments. And then you got the 6121, which was a solid version of the 6120, the Chet Atkins signature model at the time, Chet Atkins model, which is very similar to the 6131. So yeah, it does get kind of complicated, but that's kind of how they rolled back in those days. What's the 6134 was the Penguin. And the Penguin, of course, one of the rarest guitars in the world. The originals were made in the same batches as the Falcons when they were built, which in the Falcons themselves, very rare creatures from the 50s. I think I believe I'm right in saying that there are no recorded Falcons or Penguins ever made in 1957, for example. So any that were sold in 57 had been already made in 1956. Just very few of them. I think very fewer than 50 pieces of the original Penguin in existence from that original era. Of course, we now make new versions of them, as you'll see later with Rabea. He's got a couple of Penguins which he's very pleased with. So you can talk to him a bit more about that. So yeah, that's a bit of a rundown. Let's see if there's any questions here. Monkeys reissue? No, not that I'm aware of. I've never done a Monkeys reissue. Never say never though. I'd like to see one of them, but it's not on the cards. Don't quote me on that. Gretsch White Falcon is the Cadillac of all guitars, indeed. In fact, the Cadillac tailpiece, what we call the Cadillac tailpiece, which was on the original Falcons and Penguins, and we still use, kind of informed our design, for example, on that V-stop tailpiece that I was talking about. So that V kind of echoes the V on that original Cadillac tailpiece. Brian Seltzer, Brian Setzer or Patrick Stump's models. Besides country, what are some other notables? Are you talking about models which are not sort of country players? So we have a Tim Armstrong model in the Electromatic range, which is based on his original 70s country club. And that's actually the pickups. This is an interesting quick story for you. So when we were developing Tim Armstrong's signature model, he has, as I say, a 70s era, the Baldwin era country club. And some of you may know, a lot of the guitar brands in the 70s had a little bit of a sine wave, shall we say, on their quality over there. But so sometimes you got really good ones, sometimes they weren't so good. Turns out that Tim Armstrong's was a really good one that sounded great. So we sort of reverse engineered the pickups on his guitar in order to create them for the signature model. And they sounded so good that we thought, okay, we're going to put them on our regular Electromatic model. So those black top Filtertron pickups you see on a lot of the Electromatic models, the hollow bodies and some of the solid bodies, they were developed from that Tim Armstrong model when we last upgraded those Electromatic models back in 2016. So that's a nice little story. That's just to give you an idea of the tonality of those pickups as well. It has that sort of 70s rock kind of upper mid punch to them, combined with the sort of regular Filtertron tone that we know and love. Of the new guitars, are there any 3 pickup ones? No, is the short answer to that. Generally, 3 pickup guitars in our world is kind of reserved for the custom shop, because it's quite on a hollow body or semi-hollow guitar, it's generally, with those larger size pickups, it's generally not the most desired sort of setup. I think the Paddy Stump model is the only one we do at the moment with 3 pickups, as far as I can recall. Billy Duffy Black Falcon. Yes, you're right. They were very limited edition when we released them. Again, never say never. The white one is kind of the one that's most associated with his playing, but he certainly does play the black one occasionally, still in a live sense. But at the moment, no plans to do another run of that. But as I say never. To the streamliner range. An interesting question. The reason because the Broadtrons were very the very first inception of the Broadtron as a concept was when we designed them for the streamliner range, and the reason we did that, being a sort of entry-level model in Gretsch world, streamliners were designed to appeal to those people who perhaps never tried a Gretsch before, or maybe never thought that the Gretsch sound could be for them. So the Broadtrons, as I said earlier, are very much designed to be sort of leaning towards the traditional humbucker sound while retaining the Gretsch tonality, the clarity, and the that top end that I talked about earlier. So, I mean, I think that will remain the streamliner thing, the streamliner sound, and then for the Filtertron sound, you'd be wanting to move up into the sort of Electromatic world. Was there any significant difference between the white Falcon single cuts and double cuts? Only the depth of the body. So the single cuts are traditionally much deeper. I think they got a little bit shallower into the 60s, but they would have still been probably 2¼ inches, whereas the hollow bodies are usually about 2 inches, so there's not much in it. And also, of course, the upper fret access is probably a little bit easier on the doubles. But yeah, primarily pickups, bridges, tuners, all those things, the actual body construction, laminate maple and so forth, that was all the same. Oh, on the doubles, I think also on the double cuts, just to say, they often had those various gadgets like the string mute system and everything, whereas that didn't really, you didn't see that too much on the single cuts. Black and white Falcon, other than the color, no, it's just the color. You get the black Falcon, which is black with gold sparkle binding, the white Falcon, white with gold sparkle binding, and then of course you've got the third one as the silver Falcon, which is black with silver sparkle binding. But again, constructionally, they're all the same. There are era differences. We have done various black Falcons and white Falcons from the sort of 55 era. So they have Dynasonic pickups and the vertical logo. Or we've done the 59 era, which have Filtertron pickups with the horizontal logo and the little name badge, thumbnail inlays, that sort of thing. So yeah, there's differences between the eras rather than parallel between the models. What is the future for the streamliner? Well, there's a question. Continued expansion of the range of models and colors that we do. As you can see with this new P90 model, it's a really good platform for us to be able to experiment with what you might say are non-traditional Gretsch features while still maintaining our brand identity and that signature sound. But yeah, no, the streamliner range, lots of possibility. 26, 22. 26. Okay, so on the regular streamliner models have, so the 2622 and 2655, those regular models have those Broadtron pickups that we've talked about, the BT2S. So they are humbucking pickups. Then you get the new models, which are 2622-P90 or 2622T-P90, and so that indicates that they have these new Fidelisonic 90 pickups on them, which are the staple variety. You may have seen some limited editions floating about the place. We have occasionally done some limited edition models which have regular soap bar P90s in them. And also, referring back to the person who asked about 3 pickup guitars, we have done some limited edition models of those varieties which actually have 3 pickups in them. With limited edition, there's all sorts of variations that you'll find out in the out in the world, but I'm mainly sticking to our regular production models here. But if you do stumble across one which I haven't mentioned, it's probably a limited edition. G400, well, we have kind of a similar, the G100 is what we kind of have at the moment in the range, and we also have the New Yorker. Which way shall I lean? There we go, the New Yorker back there, which is a similar sort of concept, that sort of more jazzy jazz box kind of concept. It seems unlikely that we'll release the G400 again exactly as it was, but that's not to say that we won't come out with something to complement the New Yorker model. Get muddled up with my sides here. The New Yorker model or the G100. So yeah, let's do one last question and then we can wrap up this section. Those historic guitars, where did those historic guitars fit in? Okay, the historic series were pre-Fender, so that was during the Fred Gretsch era. So I'm not too familiar with the model numbers on them, and it's probably, as I said, you could treat that as part of the past legacy in terms of the model numbers. The system that I described for model numbers recently, just a few minutes ago, is really something that we have been trying to instigate only in the last few years. So it wouldn't have applied back in the historic series, but yeah, that was just. I think the historic series was the precursor to the Electromatic range back in the day when it was before the Fender thing. I'll just answer and include any tech in the future models. I'll just go answer that one quickly. Depends what you mean by tech. I doubt that we're going to put in any modeling equipment or circuit boards or anything in there. At the moment, we're going to keep it traditional rock and roll guitars because that's where we're comfortable sitting. We like rock and roll. We're renegades like that. So what's happening now is just over on another channel. So we're having the pro video is going to go out live now with the Captain and Danish Pete, and then in about 15 minutes or so at 5 p.m. we shall come back with Rabea Massaad, and we'll be having a little chat with him and about his view on these Gretsch guitars. So stick around, and I'll see you in a bit. And we're back. Welcome back, those of you who have been waiting, and welcome to those who have just joined us. In this segment, I'm very pleased to welcome YouTuber extraordinaire and wonderful guitar player, Rabea Massaad.
Hello.
Hi, Rabea. How are you?
I'm all right, thank you. How are you?
I'm very well. We're on the anniversary of this year of lockdown. Have you been surviving it?
Really,
Yeah.
today? Oh, wow.
Today, yeah.
I didn't know that. Well, happy anniversary.
Thank you very much. Well, I think we're all surviving. Looks like you got a great space to survive in with that studio there. Looks awesome.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, it's kind of built up over a few years, sort of accumulating the different bits that I've needed to make it just how I want it, I guess. So, yeah, definitely I think the term I heard was 5-star prison for lockdown, I think. And I was like, yeah, to be fair, there's a lot worse place I could be locked down than the studio, I guess.
Indeed. Cool. Well, thanks for joining us on this Gretsch Takeover day.
My pleasure. Thank you.
I think it would be fair to say you're mainly a heavy rock player, right? Or progressive rock, or that sort of ballpark?
Yeah, definitely that way out. More progressive rock than I guess metal per se, but the heavier side of things for sure.
Yeah, not maybe a place that people that might traditionally expect to find Gretsch guitars in use. So
yeah.
How do Gretsch guitars fit into your world then?
Well, originally, I mean, to be honest, I wanted them in my world, so to speak, for more of the sort of chimey cleans and like that side of things. So that's what attracted me to Gretsch, was the things like, how a Strat sounds like a Strat, Telly sounds like a Telly, Les Paul sounds like a Les Paul, and I think Gretsch has its own unique sound as well, which I felt like I needed in the sort of palette of tones that I use in my music, because those other guitars definitely have uses in that stuff as well. So but it was more the chimey clean side of things, the really nice articulate sort of sound from the pickups and stuff from the Gretsch stuff that I really liked. And players like Matteo Sasato I saw using a Penguin, and that was when the tone that he was getting from it was when I realized that's the kind of the Gretsch guitar that I was wanting to get. So I very fortunately got one, not long after that, and which was a gift actually, a Penguin, which was an amazing gift, and it's awesome. And I think through having that and then just having it in the studio and then messing around with it, using it for different applications, I started to realize that I was enjoying it I find it really good for riffing and stuff like that. Or if you want to do any kind of long ambient delay layers and stuff, the chime that the pickups give off really helps in the kind of music I like. So yeah, that's kind of how I got attracted to them, was for that purpose. But actually, I've just finished a record where I've used it all on. I paired it with a Telly, the Penguin behind me here, this one, which I used alongside a Telly for the whole record, and it sounded absolutely disgusting in a great way.
Yeah, that's one of the great things that they can be, because of the sort of broad frequency range that Gretsch pickups have. It can pair really nicely with other brands, as we've seen in many big band, stadium band situations. You can have, a single coil style guitar on one side or a humbucker guitar on the other side, and it matches perfectly with either of those sounds.
It's definitely like kind of in the middle in a great way, in the sense that it's a bit thicker than your single coils, but it totally has that information there that single coil kind of chime gives you as well. That's what I like most about it, I think.
Yeah. So you say, I was looking at a video of yours recently where you were talking about the music you like to write, and you stated about your favorite kind of music to write was progressive rock, and how you like to use down tunings to do that.
Yeah.
I see you grasping in your hands there a Gretsch baritone guitar from our Electromatic range.
Yeah.
Obviously, the factory tuning from that one is B2B. Bless you.
Thank you.
Is B2B, but it being a long scale baritone, 29 3/4 inch, I think, scale.
It's huge.
Yeah, so it can be tuned all the way down to E for that kind of bass 6 kind of vibe, or all sorts of other things. Tell us a bit about how you use it and what sort of tunings you use with that.
Yeah, well, I mean, I got sent this one to make a video of, and I was like, obviously I enjoy baritone guitars. I have my own baritone guitar, and I just love the range that it sits in. Really nice for playing all sorts of, whatever if it's heavy music, it works. If it's chilled ambient chords and stuff, I just find that the baritone range really works for me and the kind of music I like. So I was like, yeah, I'll totally check it out. And it's the longest baritone that I've personally tried. And yeah, to be honest, I plugged it in and I was messing around and getting some nice sort of chimey cleans and doing all that kind of stuff and thinking this sounds great. But it wasn't until I thought I'll just mess around with it with my Super Kraken amplifier. I chucked it on high gain, and this particular guitar, I don't know what it is about the pickups. I think the fact that they're quite low output allows them through all that gain to grunt in the same way that you'd expect, I don't know, like the guitarist from a Sugar's guitar to sound. Like, let me demonstrate. Let me find a sound that I was using. This sound. So this is just like a high gain, stereo high gain thing. I'll just mute my microphone for a second. I mean, it's just filthy.
Yeah. So I think it's interesting you mentioned the output of the pickups, because I think a lot of people would normally associate high gain with high output pickups, but I think it's not always necessarily true that the loudness that a pickup puts out is directly related to the output.
Yeah. It's high gain. That thing where it's like, yeah, higher output pickups, obviously it's more compression, so it makes it easier for lead and more articulate stuff, I suppose, and it brings out certain nuances. But also, if you go the other way, it also allows the guitar if you put it into a high gain sound, it really allows the voice of the guitar to come through, which is something I noticed straight away with this. And I prefer slightly less output pickups personally as well, even when using high gain sounds, for that purpose, so that you can hear more of the guitar and the tone of the pickup than just gain.
Yeah. Sure. So what do you just stick with one tuning when you're using the baritone, or do you play around with different stuff, or what are you on at the moment?
So, well, this one is tuned to A standard, so that's been really nice for anything that's clean like that, but I'll tend to drop it as well. So that's now in drop G. I tend to just move between like standard tuning, like concert tuning, if that makes sense, E to E or A to A or whatever, and then just drop the bottom string on. I tend not to delve too far into the world of crazy tunings, because I get a bit lost. Yeah,
same here. So cool. So I mean, so you have the Penguin over there as well. Again, I mean, we sort of dipped into this a minute ago, but again, on one of your other videos, you and I guess the reason you bought the Penguin in the first place. So when you did a video recently about specifically about recording clean sounds and so forth, or just clean sounds in general, you picked the Penguin as your go-to guitar for that, and as you mentioned earlier, you bought the guitar in the first place, your original Penguin, for those clean sounds. And of course, that is what Gretsch is famous for, is those chiming sort of clean tonalities. It's long been known in recording circles for getting that sound. But also in that video, I noticed that when you kicked into overdrive, you got this big grin on your face, and then there's a whole other sound. I mean, what are your thoughts on, in general, using, maybe not apart from the baritone guitar, but just standard guitars, Gretsch guitars, using them for higher gain? What are your thoughts on that? Do you find any limitations there, or is it just one other tonality to the arsenal?
I think The only limitation that I can see or feel with playing a guitar like this with high gain is that it's not necessarily like the slinkiest lead guitar. Like you can play lead and you can kind of play fast on it, of course you can, but in terms of like, because it's got a Bigsby, the sort of tension is different. So when you're going for big bends and tone and a half and two-tone bends and stuff, it actually really struggle with a guitar like this, whereas something that's more designed for that would work. But that would be the only tiny limitation that I personally feel with a guitar like this playing in high gain. I wouldn't necessarily go to this to shred, of course not, but at the same time, I could use a guitar like this to get, again, because of the pickups. I think these are the TV Jones pickups. They're just super barky and they have a great sound, again, for high gain. I'll go back to that same sort of patch because obviously I use it for, I very rarely use exclusively clean sounds. They're usually based off a crunch channel or there'll be some sort of harmonic content there that you consider a gain, I suppose.
Sure.
Because I like to get the chime out of it, which I find a little bit more difficult on something like just a clean channel, because there's no, you just want that little bit of hair there. But yeah, so this would be like a lead tone. It sounds leady and it does that. And the nice thing is that one thing I've always noticed as well about the Penguin, the other one that I have, and this one, is the action is really low in a really nice way. Mm-hmm. Like it's enjoyably low. But you don't get any buzz or anything like that, and it allows for, if you wanted to play like that on a guitar like this, you could totally do that.
Sure.
Which I really like, Yeah.
Well, I think, almost all Gretsch guitars have a 12-inch radius anyway, so it's relatively flat. Maybe not as flat as some of those extreme shredding guitars, but it's a pretty flat fretboard on there. And of course, the Penguin you have there and all our professional collection come out of the Japanese factory, where those Japanese guys are known for their meticulous build. The consistency of the build they have. They're just outstandingly built guitars. We should probably mention, for those people watching who are lusting over that particular guitar you have, that that's a limited edition.
This one,
so it's got that two-tone finish.
Yeah, on the back it's like a violet-y sparkle kind of vibe, as you can see a little bit there. And then
so unfortunately, anyone who wanted to get one of those guitars would have to search around for one, but they're not available in the current catalog. But we do have the white Penguin available in our Vintage Select range.
I was going to ask you the question there, because my white Penguin, which is the vintage white, it has the two toggle switches there where you can change the sort of voicing of the pickups and stuff.
Yeah,
and that was something I noticed which was different about this. This is kind of more of a go-to, just straight up two pickups, and then you standard volume, tone, and master. Mm-hmm. Do you do the white Penguin in this kind of configuration as well?
Not currently. We have done in the past. For a bit of history on that control setup, back in the day, the golden era, if you like, the control setup you have on that guitar with the master tone pot and the single switch was kind of from around 1954 to 57,
right?
When they had the Dynasonic pickups on there, and then when they released the Filtertron style pickup in 58, they introduced the tone switch as well. And the reason for that is when the tone switch is in the middle position, the pickups just go straight through. They're not encumbered by any tone circuit, and that brings out the full clarity of the Filtertron pickup.
Right.
So on that guitar, I'm hoping, now I've said it, you should have a no-load tone control on there, so you should feel a slight indentation at the end of it. And that basically, So that's what we have on the Players Edition guitar. So it's a Players Edition control setup.
Right.
And so the no-load tone control, when it's fully open, is completely bypassed. So that kind of replicates that switch. So it's kind of the best of both worlds. So we have
the two. One's a bit barkier than the other one.
Yeah. So the two switch system would be really only on reissue guitars at the moment. I'm not sure what particular model the white Penguin of yours is, but it may be that it has regular Gretsch Filtertrons on it instead of TV Jones, which might account for that slight difference in tonality, but obviously they're all made of wood, so they all sound different anyway. To the
what are you talking about? Wood doesn't affect the. What are you talking about? Wood doesn't affect the sound of the guitar.
That's controversial.
Yeah.
So yeah, shall we hear a few more sort of tones on that Penguin, just to because again, as I said in the earlier video, all our Jetstar guitars, Penguin is essentially a Jetstar guitar, has a semi-hollow body, it's a chambered body, so it's routed out. But in this case, you have the floating bridge on it, which is as opposed to a studded bridge you'll find on our Players Edition. So those all kind of affect the tonality of it. And yeah, let's have a little listen. I'm sure a lot of people out there just don't want to hear me whittering on about switches. They want to hear you playing.
Yeah, no, I won't be playing face melting high gain either, just because obviously that's a little bit sacrilege on a guitar like this. But
go for it. Do whatever you like.
I'll mute my mic so you don't get loads of string sound.
All right.
It's like a little bit of like that's what I love about the Gretsch sound is the chime that you get there. In terms of the sound that I'm using, it's an AC30 from the Quad Cortex amp with a couple of cabs, and to give me again the pairing of a Gretsch with a AC30 style amplifier, I think is a winning combination for that chimey clean.
Yeah, it's a really popular combination. Obviously, starting back in the '60s with this little old pop band, I think that cropped up in the '60s. It's George playing through his AC30, and ever since then, it's been a really popular combination, a really nice combination. But that's the great thing. You see the Gretsch guitars combined with all sorts of different backline throughout history, all to great effect. It's a good versatile combination in that respect.
Yeah, and like it's got a great openness. Like again on this, if I just get rid of some of the heavy ambience and delay, I do like a lot. Turn that off and just bring this down. Yeah, so this would be kind of on the bridge pickup. It gets a really great bark. Again, is a great sound that I really enjoy, and because it barks like that, if you get what that terminology that I use, I come up with all sorts of random words to describe it.
Yeah.
If I put that in the style of music like this particular record that I've just done recently, you'll add like a fuzz to that and a bit of overdrive or something, and it just cuts through in such a disgustingly gnarly kind of way because the pickup has I don't know how to describe it any other way than it's snarly. It kind of barks when you add the right kind of fuzzy overdrive.
Those are the sort of words we like. That's what we want.
Yeah. So like, yeah, it's definitely a good go-to for me for I'm not talking about metal, but definitely alternative rock, heavy rock, hard rock, progressive hard rock. Bands like Carnival or Black Peaks, or like even the stuff that I do is Tosca and stuff would happily welcome that sound into it.
Mm-hmm. Cool. Just having a look at the comments down the side here, I just see another amazing guitarist, Mr. Tristan Hume, is watching us. So hi, Tristan. Just a quick shout out to you.
Hello.
So this Penguin you've got is fitted with a Bigsby. Again, back in the day when the original Penguins were released, they didn't have Bigsby, so that's something that we just put on these days because lots of Gretsch fans like a Bigsby.
Yeah.
But again, not sort of thing people really associate with the heavier rock styles of music. I mean, you can't really do the full-on dive bomb or.
I was going to say I can't get the dime squeals out.
Personally, I mean, I love pushing a Bigsby to its limit when I'm playing, but you're always a little bit scared the string's going to pop out or something. But how do you get on with the Bigsby in general? Do you use it much, or is it just a thing that makes the guitar look cool?
So my assumption again before I really got educated on the Gretsch and that style of guitar was that that it always had one. I didn't know that it wasn't the case. But yeah, I mean, I'd used floating trems before, like Floyd Rose trem systems in plenty of guitars, so I wasn't like really that scared of it, if that makes sense. But something that I quite like about it is I just kind of use it just to when I've got heavy ambience going on, just a tiny little bit of that for me, just when I'm playing, just to enjoy it, because I don't really want it to go out of tune, and I find that whenever I go a bit too heavy handed with the whammy bar or whatever it is, whatever guitar, I usually destroy the tuning, so I had to control myself. But generally speaking, I love them. I think it adds a tone, and I'd be wrong in saying I would imagine that it definitely adds to the chime of the guitar, because it's like metal touching metal, and I think that has a certain contribution to the sound. But
I mean, you have nearly a pound of aluminium or aluminum for our friends across the pond there, strapped to the back of your guitar. So it's like just if you strap a big chunk of metal to the guitar, it's gonna do something, isn't it?
And also, I guess the thing that I would say that I definitely struggle with is restringing it, because on the underside, those little pins that stick out to put the ball end on, and I'm forever like being like, oh man, like trying to get it there, and then like holding it, and then like holding it tight here, and then getting enough slack so I can do that, and it pops out, and it's
what many people see as the curse of the Bigsby, but it is something you really do get used to after a little while. It's one of those things that after restringing a few times, it becomes second nature. But do you do the bending the string thing around?
I don't do the bending there.
So this is number one tip for restringing the Bigsbys with the pin. Is let me see if I've got here.
This is going to change my world. I can see it.
See, this is my tool. I've got here. I've got a collection of guitars, maybe 10 or so Bigsbys. So this is the sort of thing you need to know. Get one of these, and before you put the strings on, you grasp the ball end of the string in the pliers, and then just pull the string around so it bends the end of the string into a little U shape.
That is so useful to know.
And then you just clip it on, and because it's all pre-bent, it just sort of sits on the pin. You still have to get used to it, but it just sits on the pin. Various other people suggest holding this, once you've done that, holding the string in place on the neck with a capo. While you attend to the headstock, or other people stick a bit of sponge underneath the bar of the Bigsby to hold the ball ends onto the pin.
Another good shout.
So those are all other tips, but I've found now that I'm used to it, just once you've bent the string round, that's all you need for me. Right. Anyway, it works for me. And if you haven't got one of these handy, you can just bend it around a pen or something. Just grip the ball end and bend the string around the pen.
Right. Okay. I'm going to give it a go. I'm going to restring this just to work on that technique. But I just see Pete's there, by the way. Hello, Pete. Pete Honore. I just needed to point out that he's there because I miss him. I haven't seen him in a while. So love you, man.
Cool. And just to mention on the Bigsbys as well, on all our Players Edition instruments these days, we have the Bigsby style where there's no pin and it's just a hole, so you can just thread it through. So that's even easier. That's a Players Edition little feature.
Right. Okay.
So, but the traditional ones, you still have the pin. Not to get too geeky about it, but the variants are on the Dwayne Eddy model. He just has a longer pin, so once you put it on, it's harder to pop off. So there's ways and means to do these things, but You really do get used to it.
Yeah, I mean, it's such a small trade-off for the the sound and the way it plays and all the rest of it that it doesn't really bother me. But I might put it off slightly longer than when I'm restringing.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Very cool.
I think I put it out of tune.
Maybe we should look at the baritone again. Maybe some people who tuned in a bit later missed the baritone from earlier.
Certainly.
So the baritone is unusually for our jet style guitars. The baritones are actually fully solid; they're not chambered, and that's just to give a little bit more focus to those thicker strings. And as I mentioned earlier, it's got the longer scale of sort of 29 and a bit. I think 29 and 3/4 inch scale length.
Yeah, and this particular guitar is not actually that expensive either, is it? That was something that I was quite gobsmacked by when I saw the price, for what it is, because I mean this is a go-to for me now in the studio, because of the way it sounds. Yeah. Let's demonstrate.
Yeah, no. So it's, as part of our Electromatic solid body range, it really is. It's a pretty affordable piece of kit.
Yeah, this is for anyone that wasn't here a minute ago. I had like a really heavy sound that I was using it for, so I'll just have a little crack on that. It's just disgusting. It's so heavy.
Talking of the sounds you're getting there, we have a question here from Thomas Haynes, who's asking what software you're using. I think is he talking about the actual stream? But we'll talk about your software anyway. What setup have you got there?
I'm just currently, what you're hearing is the headphone out of my Universal Audio 8P interface. So it means that I can run everything in to the computer, into the interface like that, and then just send a headphone signal down into my streaming mixer, which is the Roland VR1 HD streaming mixer. So it's really handy because I just plug my camera into it. So you basically get like a YouTube video, my YouTube video style quality on a stream like this. So it's pretty handy. But yeah, that's just the console app for the Apollo 8P interface. From
cool. And the little module you're using for the various tones you're getting on the desk.
Oh, yeah.
Is it a pedal?
It's the brand new Neural DSP Quad Cortex. It's a modeler.
Okay.
The reason that I chose to use it was purely because I figured we'd be demonstrating a multitude of different tones and stuff, from what I'm into. And my pedal board isn't currently set up, so it seemed like this made sense. And it's like hot on the scene right now, so why not?
Oh, you should be indulging in a bit of lockdown pedal board manipulation.
Oh yeah, so we were about to go on tour before lockdown last year. So I had a new pedal board built, the Schmidt Array pedal board with the little lifty uppy layer thing, and it was like the mothership. I was so excited, and then obviously tour got cancelled, so it's kind of just been it's been up here for a lot of the videos and stuff, but for this project that I've just been doing, I needed it, so I've taken it out of the studio. So that's why. But I like to chop and change quite a lot on that pedal board because I use the gig rig, the switcher.
Yeah.
So it's nice to just chuck on different pedals here and there and try out lots of stuff because it's nice to be able to combine them that way. And also it's really good to inspire for when I'm dialing in tones for records and stuff like that. So.
All right. Very cool.
So yeah.
So did you use the baritone on because you're saying you used the Penguin on the recent record you were recording? Did you use the baritone as well on that one, or
just to double up on some of the low stuff? So some of the sections, I just tuned it an octave lower, very easily done on this particular guitar, alongside the bass and an octave pedal and a bass synth as well. So it's just mixed in there, but it's useful because it gets more of the guitar-y sound through. So you don't get too much kind of like synthy bass low end, if that makes sense. It's nice to hear like a string twang when you get that attack, those big low notes. I'd love to play you some, but I can't. It's not coming out yet.
No sneak previews for us. No worries. So when do you think that is coming out? Have you got a due date for that yet? Or
yeah, it's going to be 30th of April. So yeah, it's kind of it's a project that just happened out of the blue. A very good friend of mine, Liam Kearley, is the drummer from Black Peaks, who I don't know if you've heard of, but they're a great band, and we've been friends for years. And we always talked about making a record together, just getting in a room and seeing what would happen. So we did, and we ended up writing 3 tunes in 2 days, and we recorded them, and then I finished it all off here. And yeah, it's a 3-track EP, and it sounds really cool. So I can't wait to show everyone.
Nice, looking forward to it.
Yeah, nice one. And yeah, there's Gretsch Penguin on every track. I'm all over the place. So it's kind of nice that we're doing this, kind of serendipitous that I was asked to come on and chat about using Gretsch within what I do, because I've literally just finished mixing that record. So you'll get to hear what it sounds like in sort of heavy, dirty, fuzzy, progressive music.
Excellent. Very cool. Is there anything else you got coming up? Do you want anything else you want to give a shout out to, or?
Well, I don't know, really. At the minute, I've just been really busy just doing the YouTube. I mean, I've taken a bit of time away from my YouTube channel to do this project, but generally speaking, I'm just cracking on with that. The original, that new project, my YouTube channel. I was going to say skateboarding, but I hyperextended my knee this morning at the skate park, so I'm actually walking around on a crutch for the whole day. I've actually been sat in this position for about 3 hours, so I didn't have to move, so that I could do this.
Thank you for that. That's very cool. I hope you feel better soon with your knee.
It's all good. Just thought I'd throw that in there. That's what I'm up to right now. At least for the rest of the day, managing that. But yeah, cool. No, I mean, I can show you more of the kind of sounds that more of this kind of stuff that I would play this guitar for if you want.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's what people are here for, really, to hear you playing. So I think, get on it. Let's hear some more stuff.
All right, man. All right. I'm just going to mute the micage again. Do this one. So it's like, that kind of thing. Or you could also, because I use it a lot for that. Generally speaking, if I'm just sat playing, I'll just start vibing away with that sort of ambient tone. But you could also sometimes I get on this kind of hype as well. Just messing around with it.
Nice, funky.
Great. It sounds really good for all that kind of stuff. Just something about this style of pickup that it's dynamic and it lets you, get across all those articulations if you want them. So no matter how much gain or whatever, it's really comfortable sound. So yeah, enjoy that. How's the
Yeah,
hi-fi access?
hi-fi access, yeah.
On this particular one, yeah, you can pretty much get up there. I mean, I don't really play high up on a baritone, generally speaking, but you could totally like do some leadage. Let me have a go. So yeah, you can do it, but I mean, what's funny is, you know, I'm all the way up here, which on a normal guitar you'd be playing like down here somewhere. It's great.
We just had a question up on using Gretsch with fuzz. I mean, my answer to that would be yes. Gretches in general sound great with fuzz, but do you use any specific fuzz tones, or is it more sort of overdrive distortion that you go for?
Yeah, I mean, with my amp setup, I have about 5 fuzz pedals on there, so I use mainly germanium fuzz. Again, great sound for fuzz. I've got some fuzz presets that I used for tracking this record, but of course, when you're doing record tracking, you generally find that it doesn't sound great in isolation, which is quite funny. But I can show you when they have fuzzes on them. Mm-hmm. I'll use the guitar that I had. I'll show you what I've got. Let's see what's here. Might be this one. This is one of the. And this is like a fuzz. This was one of the sounds that I used.
Pretty fat.
Yeah, and then without the octave, it's this kind of fuzzy tone. I like that about the sound personally. When you double track that, and because you could hear quite clear the tone of the guitar is still there. So if you imagine that double tracked with like a big open riff, which is what some of this record is, it sounds like the speakers kind of breaking in a really nice way. Again, it's just got attitude, I think.
That's a good way to put it.
Yeah.
And did you there was another question that came up a minute ago, I think. I lost it now, but I was going to, when you had the baritone there, I was just going to quickly ask, did you have you changed the strings on it at all, or for your various tunings, or do you find the strings it comes with, were they fine?
I'll be perfectly honest with you. I've kept them in great nick because I really like the gauge that's on there. So I clean it every time I've finished playing with it so that I get the most time out of that guitar, because they're a lot thicker than any of the gauges I've currently got here. So I didn't want to lose the low end response that it has. It's like a bass string. It's great.
Yeah, I think it's just 72 on the bottom. It's pretty fat.
Yeah.
And you were talking about the pickups as well. I just thought I'd mention for the benefit of our viewers that the pickups on the baritone are pretty unique within the Gretsch range. Actually, they're not. I don't think off the top of my head that they're not available on any other guitar we currently do.
Right.
When we updated the baritone model that we had into that version. We were looking to change the pickups. In fact, we prototyped a few different types of pickups on it, and none of them were as good as the original pickup. So it's basically a mini humbucker.
Yeah, it really works for high gain. Like anyone that's got one of those, just try it out. It really is awesome. And I saw a question pop about pickup height just then. I don't adjust it. I've just left them how they are. I think they're fixed in the baritone anyway, but on this guitar, they're just set kind of as you I don't even, you can't really see, but kind of as you'd expect, really.
Yeah, there is for people wanting advice on Gretsch pickup heights, there is some information on that on the Gretsch website, Gretsch Guitars website. Because you can play around with the pole pieces on a Filtertron, you can move the pole pieces up and down to get different sort of thicker and thinner sounds to
Yeah.
sort of customize it to how you like. The other question I forgot that I now remembered was that popped up earlier was somebody was asking if you would if you had any interest in the Bigsby version of the Bigsby equipped version of the baritone for that sort of ambient shake, or would that be one step too far?
I mean, I think it'd be fun, but I don't know how much I'd use it personally. Like, because when I pick up that guitar, that's either going to be for the really moody ambient stuff, or I'm going to be doubling up on some really fat riffs, that kind of thing. That's what I'd go to for that personal guitar. Because I know you can use them in that kind of, like you're saying, like that bass six way, and a lot of people will do all sorts of cool picking, kind of funky, rhythmy stuff as well. But when I'm using that, that's generally what I use it for. So I think a Bigsby wouldn't necessarily be that useful for me. But at the same time, having a guitar in drop G with a Bigsby is pretty cool.
Yeah, excellent. Okay, well, I think we're nearly out of time, so I'll just say to everyone that the next thing up at 6 o'clock is chat with Vice President of Gretsch Guitars, Jason. So that's going to be coming up at 6. Meanwhile, people can check out the videos elsewhere on the Andertons channel and hit like and subscribe and all that stuff. What do they say? They say smash the
Smash that like button.
Yeah, that sort of stuff. I'm not up to key with those sort of phrases, but that's the sort of thing we're looking to do. So for the last few minutes, maybe you want to play us out with some riff on whichever guitar you, whichever Gretsch, of course, you choose, and play us out for a few minutes with some rock and riffage.
I will do that, and I just want to say thank you as well for asking me on to do this. It's really, it's been fun.
Thanks very much for coming to talk to us, and it's been a great pleasure.
Awesome.
Let's have some outro music.
You can hear me tune up too if you want.
It's all part of the experience. This is live streaming.
Yeah. Right, I think we're nearly there.
So while you're tuning, just to say, so 5 o'clock is with Jason Barnes from Gretsch, and then of course at 6 o'clock we have Richard Fortus coming on, who's talking to Lee, the Captain Anderton. So lots to look forward to, and thanks again to Rabea for talking to us and playing some cool stuff.
Thank you.
And, yeah, let's hear some bits.
Right, I'll just jam on this kind of vibey sound that I had before I started playing, before we started this. So yeah, nice one.
Cool, thank you.
Just some random noodling, but yeah, there you go.
Cool. Well, thanks a lot, and let's wrap that up for the day. So, really cool stuff. Thanks a lot, Rabea.
Cheers.
All right. Well, I think that's it. Oh, sorry, we're back. Oh, no. That's it. Sorry about that, folks. I'll say it all again. Is this the most popular thing to say in lockdown or what? I was on mute. I do apologize. Just quickly, we have at 7 o'clock Mr. Richard Fortus coming up, talking to Lee Anderton. At about 6:45, we have the Captain and Danish Pete are releasing the next and last video for the Gretsch MPI. But right now, tuning in from the sprawling deserts of southern Arizona, we have the VP of Gretsch Guitars, Mr. Jason Barnes. Hi, Jason. How are you?
Hey, I'm not too bad. How are you?
Yeah, it's not too bad, apart from my little mute error earlier on, but who hasn't had them in the last year?
I think you'd be good at it by now, right? I'm used to it.
Who'd have thought? Who'd have thought? So yeah, you're Vice President of Gretsch Guitars over there at our Gretsch HQ in Scottsdale, Arizona. How's things over there for you at the moment?
Not too bad. I mean, we're always really busy. But again, being busy doing this kind of thing, when that's what you're working on, it's not too bad. There are worse jobs in the world. And yeah, just really busy thinking of new cool stuff to come out with.
Excellent. Cool. Well, before we get on to anything you might be able to hint about regarding that, perhaps shall we start off with how about a little background on Gretsch and the legacy that the likes of you and I have to uphold in this day and age.
Yeah. You know what? I mean, it's funny. We are what amounts to be just a small part of a 138-year history. I mean, we founded in 1883 and have managed to stay pretty operational the whole time, pretty active the whole time, even during 60s and 70s. But it's been pretty much all the way forward. So it's a real fascinating story. In the early days, you do have the 1883, and you think about that time period. It's very common to have look, we want to move out to America, start a new life, escape some of the turmoil that was going on in Europe. And for one German family, that was the same story. And with Friedrich Gretsch, his vision of a better life was settling in Brooklyn, New York, and creating musical instruments. And he was able to get the Gretsch company started 1883 and had a really decent business going. Unfortunately, he passed away, a short 12 years later. So that was the first big threat to the company at that point. And it fell into the hands of Fred Sr. when he was a teenager. So you think about the turn of the century era and business in New York City, no less. That could have been, a showstopper right there. But the interesting part about it is Fred Sr. took the initiative, and by 1916 was, moved the company into a 10-story building on 60 Broadway in New York City. And by 1920, it was acclaimed as the largest musical instrument manufacturer in America. So what really could have been a game over actually set the foundation for the Gretsch that we have now. And it just came down to pure initiative and pure love for what we were doing. So that's probably the first great epic. And then obviously from there, I think it's a big stretch from 1920 to 1939, because guitar in itself was changing. The six-string guitar was taking over things like mandolins and banjos as the predominant instrument for popular music. And so you had that with the flat top open that we've seen forever. But as music started to change in the jazz age, it became about being louder, being part of an ensemble. So this is where the advent of the archtop started. And Gretsch was right there in the mix. And so from 20 to 39, it was basically trying to keep up with what guitarists need for the ever-evolving, musical evolution that was happening. And so why I think 1939 is the next big milestone, that's when you start to get the synchromatic line. You had that, I believe it was called the Gretsch American Orchestra Series. And that started many of the platforms that eventually evolved into the 40s and, like late 39 synchromatics, the 400s, the 300s, the 200s. And so this is when the team, and just a few years prior, a titan named Duke Kramer came into the mix, one of the big figures in Gretsch history, and said, hey, let's get serious about this. And so they came out with the synchromatic line and then a line underneath and said, we're going to go at it. Let's give this a go with archtop guitars.
Yeah, I think it's a case I think they're starting to sort of play around with the electric guitar concept in the early 30s, weren't they? And then as you say, it's really 39 where it starts to get recognizable as Gretsch as we know it today.
Yeah, and that's, for me, I think 39 into about 51, 55. That is one of the most fascinating periods for me, because this is, again, you start with the synchramatic and you get the semblance of the Gretsch isms. You know, you start to see the hump block inlays, and you see things like cat eyes, and you even see lower than the light bulb headstocks on some of those higher synchromatics. You actually see in some of those artist guitars what ends up becoming both the jet headstock and the larger late 50s headstock that we employed, you know. So it's really interesting to see that. And it was an evolution. I actually have something here. You know, this is a more modern version of a synchramatic, but you can see, again, those Gretchisms. You've got the cat eye sound hole, and you've got things like the synchrosonic bridge. And you get in there, and I'll flip this around so that you can see the stair step. And I think you remember your history. These were part of the 7 points of supremacy. You know, we were one of the first to do an asymmetrical neck, but you can see, you know, a lot of craft here in the bridge base, and then obviously a regular saddle there, and then the big pick guard. But you can see, I mean, here's the perimeter, and a lot of this flows directly from the synchramatic collection. But you only, I mean, you have to picture, instead of the single ply binding, 13 plies of binding around the outer red, 7 plies in the F hole, and around tone hole is what they were called back then. And within that 13 ply, you actually see sparkle. And in the split hump blocks of those early synchromatics, you also saw gold sparkle. So you start to see these Gretchisms start to emerge from 39 all the way into 51.
Of course, that gold sparkle coming from the other side of their factory, from the drum sort of part of their factory. They saw the opportunity to use some of that parts and make their guitars stand out from the crowd. Yeah,
and it really was. Okay, so a lot of follow the leader at that point, and with Duke and the leadership in charge there to say, look, what is a Gretsch? You know, what is this? This is not becoming a commodity thing anymore. You know, artists are starting to express themselves musically, but also stylistically. So they took a look at that line and said, how do we become us? You know, and I think what's great about that, again, just those little tiny Gretchisms, they start to morph into things that become Falcons and Jets and country clubs. And that's really where it starts, you know. So from 39 all the way up to 51, you start to see evolutions. And I think the next big epic for me is right around 51. So post-war, you know, World War II really slowed down manufacturing for everybody. You had to ration materials, et cetera. It was hard to import, export. So there was very low volume from all the great builders at the time. But in the post-war period, at least here in America, we went into a boom, and music followed forth, you know. So it was another evolution. We wanted to electrify the instrument. And I think one of the big bombs that hit right around 1951 was, you know, Ike Turner, Jackie Brenson's Rocket 88. And that was really like, hey, this is a new sound. And from that, you also have Maybelline and just this big explosion of what we now know as rock and roll. And so it's louder, simpler, all of that stuff. And so from 51 to 55, once again, the makers trying to follow what guitarists needed out of the guitar, and Gretsch was no different. This is where we started to streamline the look of the instrument. And even going back to this synchramatic, you see that we left the light bulb headstock and decided, hey, let's go with some of those lower line that we were doing. Let's widen the throat, so to speak. Let's make the headstock a little bit slicker. And this became, again, the next step in what we ended up with in both Jets and 6120s. And again, next step forward, you know, let's move into just a plain scripty logo, you know, take away, I guess, what they call the chili pepper and the blade or whatever it was. Yeah, you know, move away from that, get to a sleeker design. Let's get simpler with the inlays and, you know, start to employ electronics. And this is where we saw the advent of things like the Eldorado. You know, the 400 became the Eldorado, the 300 and the 200 became the Constellation, and I think the Fleetliner. And this is where you start to see those slick perimeters, the big round cutaways, and what does become the overall shape of some of the greatest guitars that we've made in history. So that to me is a really fascinating point. 51 to 55, changing of the headstock, getting the Dynasonics in there, and entering that world of country clubs. And man, those are some of my favorite guitars of all time.
And of course, the leap between those top acoustics into the sort of country club thing, what you had in between them was the Electromatic and the Streamliner models, of course, which of course we still pay homage to with our Electromatic and Streamliner lines, because because I think a lot of our current models are very focused on the 50s and 60s stuff, but we will still want to pay homage to the stuff that led it into that.
Yeah, and that's what I think is important. You know, Electromatic was a very old line, actually. I think we really got started with that also in 1939. It was a lap steel, because you remember Hawaiian guitar. That's the Electro-Spanish or Hawaiian. There were two different ways of playing guitar on your lap, doing some of the Hawaiian styles, but also, you know, the Spanish style. And Electromatic came to fore, and I think you have the Electros and the Electro 2s around the 30s and early 40s, and that was our foray into the world of electrification. So, you know, sub-brands or whatnot, we carry Electromatic today to be, hey, this is the bare bones. This is, you know, your next step Gretsch, so to speak. This is a real powerful instrument that can handle any gig. And it goes back. I mean, what are we at? Like 70, 80 years now. Mm-hmm. So really cool stuff. You know, I love that era. I really love where the Eldorados and things like that go into, you know, the club. I think the country club was the first major line. It was probably one of our most successful guitars up until the Country Gentleman in 1964. But I mean, that's where you start to see that's, you know, the evolving 6120 shape. And like you said, the Streamliner came in as, you know, the more budget friendly, the model within that line. But again, the dual Dynasonics, you start to see the revision of the tailpiece from the chromatic tailpiece down to the G cutout with the radius top, and just further streamlining the personality of what it is for Gretsch. And I think the club is a big one because, you know, big 17-inch guitar, let's paint it Cadillac green. You know, I mean, there it is. And that's where it starts. And that's where you get the audacity flowing into things like Falcons and Penguins.
And I think the longest running model name that we have in our range, because we're still producing it.
That's true. That's very true. I mean, and it's fascinating because it's not just like a bunch of product guys from any of the brands just sitting around dreaming stuff. We're responding to how music was changing. So you think, I mean, from 51 to 59, think of all the different types of music that exploded all over the world, but particularly in the United States. And then you think of how all the major brands came to fore, you know, the little upstart called Fender in 1946. I mean, you just see what happened with instruments and how it goes. And it's an amazing time period. It absolutely is, for both music and for the instruments that made them.
Mm. And the also the attitude of just being brave enough to be ostentatious, you know, having a white guitar with sparkly gold binding and proclaiming it to be the most expensive guitar in the world. That was as well.
Yeah, I mean, that was the epitome of the "come at me, bro" guitar, right? You're going to show up with one of these and take the stage and take notice. And I think that's a lot of the persona and attitude for some of our great players. You know, Richard, which you're going to speak to in a minute, is a Gretsch freak, loves it, knows his stuff, an amazing player. And it's just that experience, putting it up there. And I think, I mean, you'll agree, and not just talking, this is guitar guys to guitar guys. There's something about taking that 17-inch body, or any Gretsch for that matter, you sling it on and you feel larger than life. You hit that big open chord. It's wide, it's powerful, larger than life, right? I mean, you just feel 10 feet tall.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's a bold statement, physically and sonically, because he had that sonic punch as well as as I said, whether it's a bright white guitar or an orange guitar or the Cadillac green with the gold all over it, there's no denying what you've got there.
Yeah, and it's a sign of the times, right? And you even think about how crazy the Telecaster or the Stratocaster looked back then. I mean, same type of thing. It's exploration. And I think the White Falcon, the country clubs, I mean, even the 6120, it was somewhat daring for its time. And I noticed a little comment by Pete about his 1958 single pickup. I mean, that's where it's at, man. The Tennessean, that little guy, oh my gosh, it screams. And people love that single pickup setup because it's just raucous. I mean, it's amazing, you know. So I know you're a big, 55, 59 guy. So let's talk a little bit about that. You know, our partnership with Chet Atkins, that 6120, as you mentioned, evolved from a Streamliner that we outfitted for him Had the pleasure, in 2019, we were able to move around to actually get into the Country Music Hall of Fame and look at the guitar, out of the box, taking pictures, checking it out. And it's amazing, because that's really what started it for a lot of people, that orange guitar. And tell us about your fascination with the orange guitar.
The irony about that is the first time I sort of fell in love with it, and for me, as you say, it's the 6120, which is my number one guitar, let alone Gretsch guitar. But the very first time I sort of fell in love with it was in a black and white video. I was into Chet Atkins at the time, and I was playing around with the finger picking thing and everything. And then there's this video I found on YouTube of him playing. I think it may have been 58 even, but it was that model with the Filtertrons, and it's a black and white video. But just there's something about the shape of the 6120, particularly the depth of it versus the width of it, and those big oversized F-holes, as we call them, but those sort of very curvy F-holes that we use, which is one of our signature looks, combined with you could see the grain of the wood, and all of that, and the proportions of the guitar for me, and still to this day, are just perfect. That model, of course, the 6120 is the basis for so many other models, including our Electromatics and streamliners. That's that 16-inch thing. I love being a tall guy. I love the Falcon as well, but a little bit bigger, and it looks in proportion on me, but probably a bit more so even than the.
You're one of the few. I'm not in that club.
But it's still, if you see the Falcon on Malcolm Young, of course, it looks humongous, about half his whole height. But no, the 6120 for me, that was the thing. That just the proportions of it, and it's. I think I was vaguely aware in the back of my mind that it was orange, because I'd seen, Brian Setzer or other videos of Chet or whatever. But it was that black and white video where that was the one that really clicked it for me, I think.
Yeah, and it was seminal in its own, because I think in a lot of folks' mind, when you do close your eyes, you do see the big orange guitar. And it was very, very important for us, because, again, in that day of rock and roll and just virtuosity, similar to what we're seeing today, where people are playing guitar for real, and it's not strumming anymore. This is about being an amazing musician with facility. It was the same in the 50s. And, some would say that in that time period, and arguably today, Chet Atkins was one of the greatest guitar players to ever walk the earth. And so the partnership with Chet is where we took, a passionate group of people making instruments with an amazing guitar player who was also passionate about instruments. It's just one of these marriages that you see between brands and artists that really created an icon. You take those early 50s 6120s with the Dynas, and think of all the earthquakes that have been caused by that. My dad, he was born in 42, and so he grew up in the rock and roll era. So there was a lot of Duane Eddy, being from Phoenix, obviously there's a lot of Duane Eddy, Eddie Cochran, Lambert and Baker, and some of this stuff. And I remember hearing Rebel Rouser for the first time. I remember hearing Up and Down, what we call twang now, with that huge, cataclysmic verb, and all you're doing is just hitting it with a pick, and it's really shaking the whole room. And that's the 6120, right? That little tight body. I think in those days it was 15 3/4, possibly 15 1/2, and you get to the 2 3/4 there with the parallel bracing, and it just rings. And then, as the 50s go on, I think is the next chapter in the next era that really got you, was when we got to the trestle bracing and we got into the Filtertron and figured out how to, eliminate hum, of course, but the byproduct of that scientific experiment really became one of the main vocal points to what a Gretsch guitar is, that Filtertron pickup. Just, the high fidelity, it's wide, it's clear, it's massive, right? And so I've actually got something.
Okay.
Here's a vintage one, right?
Oh, wow.
And actually, I think this is a 60. You look at that body depth, when almost by the month we were changing body depths of the 6120, trying to fine tune it. But this is the one. In fact, this is where we really started when we made the partnership with Fred Gretsch. We started from some of these old and got a lot of the perimeters from this very guitar. And like you said, the big F holes, the Filtertron pickups, there's your rocking bar bridge, cool stuff like the headstock, fluted, the horseshoe, of course, right? The thumbnail, I don't know if my camera is spry enough to get the figuring on the maple, but
Oh yeah, I can see it a little bit.
yeah, I mean, this is it, right? I mean, this is it. This is the big orange monster. And it started 54, 55 and rolls its way all the way forward today. Obviously, Brian is another holder of this mantle, making this a really iconic, truly iconic instrument that appears everywhere and everywhere when we're talking about guitars. But
Right,
this is cool, man.
I mean, Brian Setzer was obviously a big part of the reinforcement of Gretsch for me back in the day. I don't think. I mean, it's very difficult to talk about Gretsch in any context without mentioning Mr. Setzer. But I think you were mentioning the Filtertron thing versus. So back then, I wasn't so. I was a naive, yet very young, very new guitar player, and so it was the look that attracted me. And then I had the sound, and I loved the sound of the Filtertrons. And retrospectively, it was 20/20 hindsight, and I realized I like the sound of the Filtertron. I'm a single coil guy as a rule. Yeah. Pretty much the only humbuckers I have in my collection are Filtertrons, with a couple of exceptions. But because they have that kind of single coil chime to them, while still having not only the physical humbucking qualities, but also that slightly fatter and broader frequency range of a humbucker.
Yeah, and I think that's, again, part of these signature things that build up to a Gretsch in 2021. That's one of them. I think we crossed that point in those days where you had the Dyna, which it's a pretty unforgiving pickup, but you can't dispute the clarity. You can't dispute the size of it. As a single coil, it's still very, very vibrant, but it takes up a lot of space. And so when we're moving over to the Filtertron, I think when they had that original tone layout with the master tone, it lost a lot of its shimmer and its shine. So to non-Gretschis of the world, that second switch up on the upper bounce, like what in the world does that do? And why is it there? The infamous mud switch. I think where it came about was, look, the Filtertron is so three-dimensional. It's so clear and defined when it's got nothing in the way. And so when you had the pot in there, there's just that little bit of electronic resistance that really almost put a blanket on what it truly was. So I think the solution there was, look, people want tonal variation, but they do want to, similar to say like an Esquire, you want to be able to have that pickup straight out the pipe to rip your face off. And we got to preserve that, because that's a lot of what the Dynasonic was. So having that second switch is just preset roll-offs done with some capacitors that gives you preset where you would turn a tone knob. And at any point in the game, put it in the middle, and there it is. There's that full, 100-foot width of sound that you expect from a Gretsch.
Yeah, we touched on that a little in the last video with Rabea, because he has a Penguin, limited edition Penguin with filters, TV James ones as it happens, but he has the Player's Edition setup. So we talked about the no-load volume tone knob on there, which replicates that concept you're talking about. So when you have the no-load all the way up, it's completely bypassed. So that replicates the concept of having a switch in the middle there.
Yeah, and that's where you get the best of both worlds, because, especially with today's player, and by today's player, I really mean the last 5 to 8 years. I mean, we're seeing some just monster mutants out there, and it's not just about technical facility. You're getting the spirit of players like Chet Atkins, Lenny Breau, people with their fingers who can control tone, multiple voicings, inversions. I mean, you see it. Obviously guys like Mateus Asado, Nigel Hendroff, Michael Guy Chislett, they're able to create these soundscapes, but also structure it tonally. So it's not just about fingers. And so being able to provide the Filtertron at full width, but also giving you all those in-between points from, really rounded to the full bore, I think is a really important thing about Player's Edition. And I think it's opened up an entire palette of tones for today's players.
Sure. I think, shall we just have a quick pause? Because I'm noticing some comments in the section here. A few people are asking, I think, about the range of guitars we have in terms of the price point.
Sure.
I think a lot of people are assuming that Stephen Stern's creations are all that Gretsch are, and that's the price point. So maybe we touched on it a little bit. I touched on it a little bit earlier at the beginning in my first introductory video a while ago, but I think a lot of people have joined us since then. Maybe you'd like to give us a rundown of the Streamliner, Electromatic, and Pro Collection, and how you see them kind of lining up in the world.
Yeah, gladly. I mean, Streamliner, Electromatic, those are names we've had for quite a while, and they've always represented what I think is termed an affordable version of a Gretsch. So I think when we partnered with Fred Gretsch, we came out and evolved the professional collection. And so these have been made, in Japan for quite a while. They've been making them for decades. You got people shaving the necks down there who have been doing it for 15 to 20 years. And the approach really was, okay, so let's take the 5960 Gretsch that we have here. Let's tool, let's, MRI, we MRI'd that guitar. And let's take the approach, like let's make Gretsches like we used to. And that was the first, here it is. This is the Gretsch line. Mr. Gretsch had kicked it off, Fred Gretsch III. Let's get the basics, let's get the Falcons, let's get the Nashvilles, let's get the Tennessee Rose at that time, and the Southern Bells, and let's get the basics. And then, the partnership with Fender, we evolved that one step forward with some greats like Mike Lewis doing a lot of work to really fine tune what Mr. Gretsch had started. And so we've been with the professional collection. That is the flagship line. That is what we do. That is the working persons. This is the Gretsch of Gretches. And then later we built, I think it was 2004, where we said, hey, people want a USA Gretsch, but they also see the Gretsch as a dream factory. And so this is where we got Steven Stern and his band of merry misfits to get in there and start creating these amazing instruments that you're seeing, taking these platforms and even one step further, right? I believe you even own a pretty nice Stern yourself,
I'm lucky enough.
Yeah, you're Penguin, right? So in USA, we have our custom shop there, pretty much handmade, not a lot of CNC involved. It really is a group of thugs upstairs muscling their way through wood and chisels and paints. I think, you've seen a lot more of them on Instagram. If you're not, I suggest you follow them because they've got some amazing stuff coming out. So we do have these price points where, hey, let's start at $2,000, professional instruments. I mean, for the most part, they are either set neck or, dovetail hollow body. So it's not a cheap guitar to make. And so we needed to offer something that gave more of the Gretsch essentials, that gave you, pro level quality, got you there with the sound. You have the Gretschisms, whether it's in style or in tone, but we needed, something that's a little bit more rock solid and a little bit easier on the budget. And so this is where Electromatic came in, and we took to the drawing board and say, okay, so what's a 6120 look like, sound like at $800? And that's where Electromatic was born, and it filtered into things like Jets. And frankly, that's one of the most thriving product groups that we have. And then much later, we said to ourselves, look, there's still some opportunity. Some people, they still can't get into the $800, $500 price range. So let's get into Streamliner. Let's open up the world a little bit more. And with Streamliner, it's like, hey, a big guitar, for instance, is not usually someone's first guitar, but let's get people exploring with the tones of a center block or a hollow body guitar. Let's start there. Let's get enough Gretsch in there. Let's voice those pickups to be very similar to what you would see in a more formal Filtertron format. And let's give them the Gretsch itch. If they want to explore more, there's a whole range of guitars up above to get at. But that's the way this starts. We obviously import because that's just how economics work. But I think we have Gretsch on the headstock of every guitar because we believe that every one of them is great enough to don that name.
Absolutely, and that's an itch which is hard to get rid of, as a lot of us know. Another question has popped up here about, here we go, about what determines which Bixby goes on well, any guitar really, I suppose. To answer this specific question, if I may, I think Jason, you spec'd up this smoke grey Penguin, didn't you? So
it depends on the beer we're drinking at the time when we're looking at the pen and paper.
Yeah.
I think with a lot of the limited editions, like for instance, I do have the Penguin back here. So we play around with limited editions, and if you're new to the line, basically our professional collection boils down to our artist signatures, and then we have our players editions and our vintage select. And so vintage select for us basically is, hey, vintage where vintage makes sense, because let's face it, in the 50s, construction wasn't always the greatest. There are some things that you don't want to replicate when you're really trying to get at a $3,000 guitar. Player's Edition was, let's roll the clock forward. Let's keep to what we do, but let's just make the guitars easier to play. And so usually the approach with limited editions is, hey, let's take inspiration, but let's make them playable. With this one, we said, yeah, let's do 58. So we went on this one with the normal, posted Bigsby, and we went with some TV Jones. Hey, Tom, does a fantastic job, has devoted his life to making great Filtertrons, so we partner with him often. But let's just take the guts, but let's do something like a Koa. So to answer your question, I think it's really just, let's dream up a guitar, and that's what limited edition is really about. It's about having fun. And for instance, the Smoke Gray, let's base that off of a Players. I know we got a lot of asks for that one. That was one of the most successful Penguins we've ever made. And I think part of the charm of those is it did have those Players Edition features. So you want the no low tone pot, you want the string through Bigsby for that type of player. And there's no cut and fast rule. It's just, what are we in the mood for, and who do we think the player is going to be?
And just as a sort of extension to that, specifically to the Bigsby thing, so the history of the Bigsby is back in the 50s, we only installed Bigsbys as standard on Chet Atkins models. But the point being is, when we did install Bigsbys, they were the black trough standard Bigsby officially up until 1960. I think 1960 was the official launch year for the V cutout, but they were building them in 1959, ready for 1960's launch. So I read
that even as early as 58, we were doing that on things like country clubs. But I think you're right. Officially, it's that 5960.
Yeah, so you had that the V cutout Gretsch branded Bigsby coming in at 5960 time. So as you were saying earlier, where the Penguin's based on a 58, you would have the black trough, whereas anything that's based on a 59 or a 60, going forward, you'd have the V cutout. And
Bigsby, right?
Yeah, and then because it's got Gretsch written on it, that's basically why we chose to use that version on the Player's Edition, of course. So and also it's a stylistic thing. I personally think the V cutout Bigsby just looks cool.
Yeah.
So I have, I think my Brian Setzer model originally came with the black trough Bigsby on it. It's a Brian Setzer model from a few years ago, had the black trough Bigsby. I've swapped it over to the V cutout just because I think it just looks cool. So I think, coming back to the limited edition thing, as you said, it's kind of when you or one of our team comes up with a limited edition concept or spec, it's a lot of it is about what looks cool as well as what function.
Yeah, it becomes a palette. I mean, I think a lot of us, I have plenty of 6120s. I've got my number one. I've got a tortoise guard. I've got, one die on the master. I think Gretsch does become a mod platform, even at, plus $2,000. Like, for instance, I'm a black trough Bigsby person. I like the feel of, hey, this is retrofitted just like it was in the old days. So I think we've all got our flavor. Oh, yeah. But I think, all that points to this notion that, not just for us, 51 through 59 was an incredible time period, and you got to see what it amounts to be some of the greatest instruments in music in the world. And that set the springboard to, the 60s. And for us,
prior to just breaking off for a moment there, but we got up to the 59 and we got up to the sort of the Filtertron thing, and that's the 50s, and that's that kind of timeline. But as you say, what happened next? The 60s. That was a equally, if not perhaps even more important time for the brand.
Yeah, I think, like, behind me, and I'll grab it, I've got 1960 all the way to 1965 in one guitar.
There we go.
Right? You want to tell me what this is?
This will be the George Harrison signature model.
Yeah, painstakingly created. I think we flew the guitar over.
We did, yes. One of my colleagues may even be watching now. I haven't seen his name pop up, but a colleague, Simon Blundell, was the Gretsch guy before me. So about 10 years or so ago, 10 or 12 years, was it? And he personally accompanied the guitar over. The guitar had its own seat on the 747.
Right. And so why, in my opinion, a 57 Jet represents 60 through 65, not just in terms of Gretsch, but also in terms of music, is obviously Mr. George Harrison he was a Gretsch fanatic because of Chet Atkins. So aside from the big influence and wave that Chet Atkins created for Gretsch, one of his largest contributions was his inspiration to George Harrison. And right here with this guitar, that's where you have Please Please Me. I mean, that's Twist and Shout. That's I Want to Hold Your Hand. That's Hold You Tight. And that is a sound. And you really listen, go back into those records and hear just that. I mean, just the open note to that little breakdown in Please Please Me, that E chord note. I mean, it's huge. There's that twang, and it's not the twang that you expect. It's just this big, huge sound that cuts through. And obviously we know what happened after Please Please Me. It led to She Loves You, which is when he got his 62 Country Gentlemen. And of course, the stage on 1964 is really what set the course of music for the next 5-6 years. Because from there, everybody wanted to look like the Beatles for the most parts. And this is where you started to see Gretsch really take off. There were some of our greatest years in history. And this is where the guitars really started to make their ways onto some of the records that we know and love today. So the Troggs Wild Thing, right? Those big, huge open chords, Country Gentleman, right? I mean, that's where this goes. You have Brian Jones in the early years playing The Anniversary, Lou Reed. I mean, just you name it. And in my opinion, it started with a 57 duo jet. And a rat-infested cellar in Hamburg, Germany, And so the mark on history just right here, and there's where your lineage is from Chet Atkins to George Harrison, that's where things explode. Because in there, now you start to take a look at the brand in terms of Bo Diddley, in terms of Eddie Cochran, in terms of Duane Eddy. And these are the guitar monsters of that era, handing over, sonically the torch to the next generation. And from there, you get into Crosby, Stills, and Nash and Young, and you get into some of the Byrds, and a lot of the stuff where the Gretsch twang and thundering reverb transforms into that jangle and clarity, all keeping the same characteristics. It's just we're using the instrument differently to create new sounds.
Absolutely.
So there it is,
Yeah, because all of obviously you mentioned the whole era of the Beatles, and then you mentioned the Troggs, but that whole Mersey beat sound, that whole sort of British invasion, they were all using, I won't say blanket, they were all using Gretsch, but a lot of them were using Gretsch, and the Monkees, of course, from your side.
And we've thought about that many times, by the way. It'd be a nice Blondie 12-string. I think we'd do all right with that.
I think this guy might be looking for the red double cut with
the red one,
the double thumbnail,
yeah.
Logo and the white pick guard.
Yeah. Oh, cool content over here. Douglas Lindstrom, Hold You Tight, real deep cut. Yeah, man. It's just like, love it, man. Like, I mean, those early sounds of Please Please Me, and then you get into Beatles for Sale, Babies in Black, and you hear that Bigsby in action. I'm probably a Tennessean at that point. I mean, that's it for me, but not to cut you off, but I mean, I'm Beatle.
This is what I'm saying. There's so many people using that because they were coming from that rock and roll sound that George had. I mean, George was famously influenced by loads of different rock and rollers and Chet Atkins and so forth, but all those other guys would have been as well. And so they're all getting those influences from each other, and wanting that rock and roll sound.
And that's really where this is, I think, the fulcrum of what Gretsch is. We talked about the evolution of where it was a guitar, and then it became a stylistic thing, and then it evolved with music. And I think by 59 and through the 60s is where there's real substance put to the old tagline, that great Gretsch sound. It's not easily or well articulated what that means, because you span the tonal genre of what Gretsch really does. And I think a lot of you would be surprised to learn what is a Gretsch on many of your favorite records. But it's, it's easy as Oh by Jingo by Chet Atkins, all the way to what Malcolm's done, what Billy Duffy has done, Billy Zoom X, even younger artists like Tiger Army, Nick 13, keeping stuff clean. But what Gretsch is it's power and fidelity. I think you guys have seen the adverts, but that's really what it is. Like, there's a lot of force behind what a Gretsch does, while also having definition. And so whether it's ambient stuff that you see, get it through your Strymon, do it all that stuff, or just rock out with an amp full blown, you still have that character. And I think it all crystallized 59, 60. That's really where it was. The guitars came to fore. People started painting with that brush in different contexts over the next few decades. And that set, what I believe is very special about Gretsch is it really does have its own sound. It has its own style. And even with something like a Koa Penguin or something like a little Junior Jet, it's still Gretsch. And that's what we strive to do, is like, let's stay us, stretch your legs, do what you are. But at the end of the day, it's got to have that great Gretsch sound, right?
Yeah, and this is exactly what Rabea was saying in the last video when we were talking to him. And he's been using the Penguin with the filters on his latest EP that he's about to release, and he's saying exactly that. It has that sound. He's using it with heavy distortion, but you can still tell, you can still hear the guitar itself through that sound. And you've got that definition. You've got the string-to-string clarity, as you said. The power and fidelity line that we use is absolutely. You've got loudness, as Pete Townsend said, it's the loudest guitar he's ever heard. Mm-hmm. So people talk about the pickups being low output, that doesn't mean they're not loud. And you still have this clarity to it, even with high gain.
Yeah, or power, right? I mean, power doesn't necessarily mean you need to crush it with a diesel. I mean, you listen to some of the tones, Rage Against the Machine, Tool, that era, that's not heavy distortion, that's size, you know. And in our case, like Malcolm Young, right? I mean, you get on into Jailbreak and you start into that grinding rhythm, or you mentioned Pete Townsend. Yeah, there's that 60. And that's why I love the 60, because it's got that 2-inch, 2 1/4-inch body, super tight. We've used it on the Rat Rods and now with the Tri-5 Limiteds, because it tightens up the chamber, works with those Filtertrons to just punch you in the face. And yeah, who's next? Who's next is almost entirely the 6120 that Joe Walsh gave him. So if you're into wanting to explore the Gretsch anthology, just put on Who's Next and listen to Bargain, listen to Won't Get Fooled Again, listen to Baba O'Reilly. Those big monster chords, that's what we're talking about. Or, you know, a long way to the top if you want to rock and roll, like get into that grinding rhythm, Malcolm just pushing it down. There it is. Or
Who's Next and High Voltage by AC/DC. Those two albums, it's just wall-to-wall chest thumping Gretsch riffage. Right. Playing well with others, right? And I mean, even Super Unknown. I mean, listen to, like, slide in Super Unknown, listen to Drown Me, listen to Fell on Black Days. I mean, that's huge. And it's characteristically Gretsch. And it's not very disparate to say, well, I think it puts the bookends on it, right? You get something like a Super Unknown, and then you roll that all the way back to, you know, Chet or Please Please Me. And there's a common thread there, and it's just this characteristic, this voice, and of course the style. Because I remember my first real Gretsch moment. I mean, I saw a lot of stuff. Like I said, my dad was a rock and roll guy, so we had a lot of Duane. And my mom was 10 years younger, and so we had a lot of Beatles. But for me, snide punk kid, you know, skater era, second wave in the 80s, you know, got exposed to a lot of punk. And then, you know, hearing Billy Zoom's tone, I mean, you have that. And of course, at that time I wasn't playing guitar, but much later, I was actually in a local band, and a friend of mine pulls out a Silverjet. And I just thought to myself, that is the coolest effing guitar I've ever seen in my life, and I need to go find one. And this was in the world before, you know, eBay was, that's the one, right? The 89. And the coolest guitar ever. And I'm like, what is that? I don't know. I like the horseshoe. I didn't know much about Gretsch at that time. And then I just started getting poked in the eye. You saw a Black Hole Sun with the gold sparkle. I'm like, this is unreal. And then what Setzer was doing, you know, I had older brothers, so Built for Speed was always on the turntable. And then you start seeing the image of Brian with the big orange guitar. And I just kept getting jostled around. And one day I cut classes, college, you know, and there was a network was replaying one of the old Saturday Night Live, you know, episodes, and it was the one with Morrissey where he's playing Glamorous Gal, and Alan White has that double cut Nashville, and I'm like, okay, that's it. I got to get one of these. You know what I mean? The big orange guitar, he rocks into it with that riff. It's just like, all right, I got to go get it. And so
I went and found it. And actually, one of my first Gretsches was the 6120 Junior, because I'm not, the tallest of stature. And then from there, I finally found the Jet, and then it's been plaguing my bank account ever since.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, I can attest to that from my own side as well. But I think that's probably a good time for us to start wrapping up. Now we've done the circular thing. We've gone from Chet to Soundgarden to Nick 13 to Pete Townsend and Billy Duffy, and we've come all the way back. It's a testament to the versatility of these things. But
even Rich Robinson, I'd like to throw one more in there. Like some of the tones you hear, I mean, Rich Robinson has been using Falcons. He was kind enough to share, like, as soon as we got bread after Shake Your Moneymaker, one of the earliest things I bought was a Falcon, and it's been on every Crows record, Magpie Salute, everything he's doing ever since. And I mean, you can listen to it, and he's just got this real grindy tone. And I think on Southern Musical, My Morning Song, listen to that one. My Morning Song from their second record, amazing tone. Like the slide, it's just nasty. Anyway, that's a plug. But again, the whole gamut. So let's move on.
All right. So just for the last 30 seconds, if you can squeeze some nice little tidbits on for the last 30 seconds, what do you see as VP of Gretsch Guitars? What do you see as the future for this great brand?
Well, I think this is a really exciting time to be in the industry. I think that's everybody. You can see it from every brand, especially the majors. The way things have gone the last few years, obviously it's been a very turbulent environment. And if there's any upside to what we've seen, it's the explosion and the interest in music. And that's not pandering or throwing out bumper stickers. It's really amazing in a world of Instagram where you are seeing countless amazing players. And again, it's not just technical facility, whether it's throwback, 80s, neo soul, you name it. There is a lot of great guitar playing going on. And it's not just men, it's women, it's people of color. It's really germinating. And so what the future looks like, I think, is going to go back to some of the things we talked about. And I'm hoping it's the situation where we're following artists again, where we're trying to catch up with what they need to do, just like in the 50s, just like in the jazz era, in the 60s. And I think that's going to happen because music's great right now. There are a lot of great artists. And I think the vision for us is to continue to be who we are and be one of the tools in the toolbox for what I believe is going to be a renaissance of guitar playing, live music, and just the feel and sensibility of what it is to feel music. That's the future for us.
That sounds good. Sounds good to me. Excellent. Cool. Well, thank you, Jason Barnes, for joining us on the stream. Maybe you'll join me again just to do a quick sign off after Richard Fortus has done his bit. Mm-hmm. And I think, so we'll wrap up this session now. And everyone who's listening in, stick around for Richard Fortus in about 10 minutes at 7 o'clock, talking to the captain, Lee Anderton. So, see you in a bit.
Thanks, everyone.
And we're back again. I'm not on mute this time, I hope. Sorry about that earlier. Yes, welcome back, everyone who's been with us for the last few hours, and welcome to any newcomers. And I'm very pleased to hand over now to Lee, the Captain Anderton, and of Andertons Music in Guildford, and he's going to be talking to the great Richard Fortus. So over to you guys.
Hello, everybody. I hope you can hear me. Could I have a virtual thumbs up? As I have no idea if you can. Yes, I've seen the virtual thumbs up. Well, thank you so much. Well done, Adam, so far. It's been amazing. I really enjoyed listening to you this afternoon. And yes, I am super excited now to do this next leg of our social takeover because the very talented and wonderful Richard Fortus is joining me now. And look at that, the power of technology. Hey, man, how are you?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm very well. And I'm loving that blue neon light in the background. Are you home or are you in the studio?
I'm in my little studio, my home studio.
Oh, well, look, thank you so much for joining us. You're obviously a long-time Gretsch fan. I was looking at your bio earlier on, and obviously people will know you as, I believe, the longest serving guitar player in Guns N' Roses, which
that's right. I am.
Yeah, I think that's such a cool thing. And you've been in the Dead Daisies, one of my favorite rock bands, and taken me right back to a misspent youth, a stint in the Psychedelic Furs as well. Everybody of my age will remember Pretty in Pink, and all watching that in our angsty teenage years. But thank you so much for joining. I believe.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
We're going to have some questions, hopefully, from people who are watching as well. But I wanted to sort of kick things off. I think I'm going to keep this quite sort of guitar nerdy focused. I wanted to kick this off by asking you: is the blend of you playing kind of Gretsch and / playing Gibson something that you chose? Did you choose to bring the Gretsch in because you felt it kind of complemented his tone in the band and gave a good mix? Or is it just a total coincidence that you like Gretsch and he likes Gibsons and that's just what we hear?
Okay. I've been a big Gretsch fan since I was a kid. And I bought my first one, I guess, when I was about 15, 16 years old. I bought a 66 Tennessean and used that through bands, with the Psychedelic Furs, with the Love, and my very first band. And then it really was complementing Slash's tone and everything. I'm also a big fan of P90s, and that didn't work at all. It fought too much. And the Gretsch really is, really you can't go wrong with a Gretsch and a Gibson. Like they complement each other really well, as proven by AC/DC for years. But I mean, Gretsch to me is the sound of rock and roll. I mean, in a lot of regards. I mean, when you look at like Billy Duffy from the Cult, there's it going back to Steve Marriott. There's always been this, like, I don't know. To me, I associate great rock and roll guitar tone with Gretsch, as well as Fender and Gibson. But for me, it's always been, it's a nice base for everything, because it's got so much low end thump to it in definition and so much high end sparkle. So there's a real beautiful element that adds, especially through a distorted Marshall. It's just hard to beat that. And it really, there's so much definition with Filtertrons, I feel, so even with an overdriven amp, you're still retaining so much clarity with chord work, and it really did complement Slash's tone well. And his tone is like obviously very iconic, and it's a very vocal sound. He has that quality to his tone, and this really just supports that. I think the Gretches do.
Does that translate in the studio as well, or is your studio sort of the selection of guitars that you might take for a recording pretty similar to what you might take on the road?
I think I mean, in my studio I've always got my signature model, which is coming out later in the year, and then also my 6120. I've got a 58, and that sits here all the time because it's, like I said, it's just, that's a go-to, you know. But as is my Telecaster, you know, my Strat, you know, I've got my collection of guitars that I choose from all the time, a handful of guitars.
Who takes more guitars on tour then, you or Slash?
Slash does. Yeah.
Do you kind of admire, are you a fan of that kind of Malcolm Young sort of vibe where it's like one guitar, hopefully try and do the whole set?
I admire it. It wouldn't work for me, and it wouldn't work for my role in Guns.
Yeah.
But I do admire it.
Is that, and that's because you just need different tones, or are you doing different tunings, or what?
Different tunings and different tones. Though honestly, I'm relying very heavily on Gretsch lately. So
right, okay.
It's most of the night. That's what I'm playing.
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned that you know, you got Telecaster in your rack as well, but I'm kind of feeling, is it that sort of Filtertron element where it perhaps feels it's got perhaps a slightly tighter bass end than a Les Paul, a little bit more of a gnarly kind of mid-range? Is that where you think the magic happens when you combine those two guitars on a track?
I think really it's the low end and the top end. You know, that's what really, you know, it seems to envelop Slash's tone, which is more, you know, like I said, vocal or mid-focused. And it really seems to support that well. In a similar way to Malcolm.
Yeah. Do you make a conscious effort as well, or do you find that certain pedals and certain amplification kind of add into that mix as well? Or
absolutely.
Actually,
yeah.
So are you using quite different? What is your sort of backline setup then compared to Slash's?
Well, his is obviously the Marshall, you know, Jubilee thing, which is a higher gain element than I'm using, which, you know, my amps are lower gain, more power amp driven than preamp probably. And, you know, I use a Supro, Black Magic combo, in conjunction with a big 100-watt Marshallist type amp, but it's more plexi-ish. It's more, it's a lower gain.
Yeah, no, I get that. You let a little cat out of the bag actually 5 minutes or so ago by mentioning your signature Gretsch guitar, which was kind of I was saving that one, but as you've said it, I suspect we better ask you a little bit about that, because I believe this may well be the first that the interweb has heard of this thing. So did you say you've got one with you?
I do. We've been developing it, and I've been talking about it, you know, in my Instagram posts and stuff. People are aware that it's coming. Okay. And it is, yeah, hopefully later this year. I've got prototypes. So we've been, man, I got to say, Gretsch has been incredibly patient with me in my nitpickiness, and very supportive, and really have not balked at anything that I've thrown at them. And we spent a lot of time getting this guitar where I want it. So I'm super, super excited about it. I actually used it on the last shows that we were doing before the world shut down.
Yeah.
I think we
because I'd love to sort of see. Okay, so we're
tortoise binding, tortoise pickguard. So it's all, you know, all the accents are tortoise, as opposed to the glittery, sparkly thing that's behind you. And but other than that, it's very similar. It's got the Bigsby. not gold though. Simplified in that the controls are simpler. It's just master volume, master tone. I don't know if you can see. But yeah, I'm really excited about it. And yeah, so hopefully that will be out I think fourth quarter.
And what have you
this
done
year.
in terms of, you know, neck profile and pickups and stuff? Have you made any changes there?
Pickups are very different. It's a very unique pickup that we've come up with. That was something that we spent a lot of time on. That, and also the treble bleed circuit, the volume pot, all of that's been tweaked back and forth and back and forth and back and forth. Also, we changed the neck angle. So it does have a center block, but it's we had to change the neck angle to accommodate the full B6 Bigsby. I found that having the down bar on the B7 really took away from the sensitivity that was really important to me. Now, there's also another model that's going to be the 24.6 scale. Will be a stop tail and will be black with the tortoise. Both double cuts, both with the center block.
And I know it's just an aesthetic, but the tortoise guard that you've gone on there is obviously quite a different. It's not that more sort of mottled, slightly ready. It looks, you know, I know obviously it's, you know, we mustn't use real tortoiseshell, but it looks much more like real tortoiseshell than some of the other guards
Yeah,
you might see on.
I agree. It looks much more expensive to me, but. It's not that, you know, it's not the real brownish tortoise that you see. And it's really, when you see it in the light, it's just very classy looking. And I really like how understated it is. You know, the gold, I mean, it's classic Gretsch, but you know, classic white talking. But I really am excited about the tortoise. I think it looks great.
Have you
especially against the black too?
Yeah, black and tortoiseshell. Oh, it's just black and tortoiseshell, white and tortoiseshell. It doesn't get any better than that.
I agree.
Are these the first? Have you worked on signature guitar projects in the past, or is this the Gretsch one the first one that you've done?
I have done. I have, but with smaller companies, and it just yeah. But it's something. I mean, I'm very particular, and I spend a lot of time modifying my guitars. And I spend I'm very particular about my pickups, especially. And what I love about what we've come up with is that it still retains that Filtertron, the EQ that we were talking about. You know, a lot of thumpy low end and very beautiful sparkle to it, and tons of definition and clarity. But it has a bit more rounded mid-range as well, so it's sort of a cross between like a Filtertron and a PAF.
Yeah, no, and I'd love to, you know, I'm really fascinated by, you know, touring rigs and stuff. So are you going out with a big pedal board for your sounds as well, or do you try and keep that element of the rig relatively simple?
You know, it's interesting. Most of the night I'm straight into the amp, or hitting maybe like a Schaefer, the Solo Dallas preamp, and that's it most of the time. But I do have a rack with drawers of pedals for certain things. You know, it's a lot of to be honest, it's a lot of stuff off of Chinese Democracy. There was a lot more experimentation going on than covering, you know, Izzy's parts, which were pretty straightforward. And so that stuff is all, you know, whenever I'm doing that stuff, it's all very simple, very, you know, Gretsch straight into the amp.
Your tech, I suppose, must love the fact that your on stage thing is just a single Solo Dallas pedal straight into the amp.
There's nothing out front. It's just I've got the rack, you know, tower preamp, but you know, I've got a whole rig, so when I do need pedals, there, it goes through the loop, and it just engages that pedal, but overall it's a fairly simple rig.
Well, I don't know if the people behind the scenes are picking out questions from people watching now. So if they are, hopefully they'll come on the screen, and I'll ask you those in a minute. But how have you, what have you managed to do over the last 12 months of, has the last 12 months enabled you to be very creative, perhaps work on some projects of your own, or are you just can't wait to get back touring again?
I've been incredibly fortunate in that I've had a steady stream of work coming in that I'm able to do from home. So I'm able to do from my studio. I've got a full rig here, so I'm able to do sessions for people when they send me albums or film scores or whatever to work on. And then I have been doing some of my own stuff. We're writing with different people and different projects. I finished, I produced the Psychedelic Furs album, and the last album that came out, and so I finished that up, and so that's what I've been doing. But it's been, honestly, I've got teenage daughters. This has been the first time that I've been able to be home this long. And it's been really great.
No, I can imagine. Can we talk about your involvement with the Psychedelic Furs for a bit? Because it's probably, I mean, I've not heard the latest album, I suppose. So everything I'm thinking of is back, from the 80s when I was in my teens. And you kind of, how did you go from kind of playing that genre of music, which, again, forgive me if the new album is very different, but, it had a very indie poppy kind of jangly vibe back then. Feels like you've obviously moved into something much harder rock with the sort of the Guns and the Dead Daisy stuff. So I'm just wondering, where was that transition?
Yeah, it's interesting. I grew up listening to classic rock bands, the Stones and AC/DC and Black Sabbath and the Beatles and Humble Pie, all that stuff, right? And then also New York Dolls, T-Rex, so then I heard The Clash and everything changed. And then I was just about, because I was never into what was contemporary when I was in high school. So I wasn't into Poison or Motley Crue, or I was more into older, Genesis or Yes, or, more the art rock stuff. And then, like I said, I heard The Clash, I heard the Psychedelic Furs, the Damned, and then I was all about that. And then transitioning into more of the, American punk rock stuff with bands like Black Flag or the Circle Jerks, so I was in that world, but it's sort of a smooth transition with Guns because we all grew up listening to the same stuff.
Right.
They grew up listening to the Dolls and the Stooges and Killing Joke, and we came up listening to the same stuff. Fear and Black Flag, and so it sort of we just sort of came around it from different angles. They sort of got lumped into that whole, because being in LA at that time, they were in that world, and I was coming from more of the punk rock side, or the whatever you want to call it, new wave or whatever.
I must admit, Killing Joke gets played about once a month on the rock radio station that I kind of tend to listen to over here. And again, it always takes me back to that. I liked, and maybe the Furs was kind of the same, maybe all music at that time was, but it's nothing like as produced as music is nowadays. And everything feels, it's like all the records had a much more live energy about them. Do you kind of,
I don't know. The early Furs was much more live and aggressive. It was more punk rock,
right.
up and talk. And then as it went into Forever Now, and Todd Rundgren's production became much slicker. And then Mirror Moves, that was also Keith Forsey. It was very slick. I'm really, this new album is, it was quite a labor of love, and I was really honored that Richard, the singer, would ask me to be involved in it. But we've had a very close working relationship for many, many years.
Well, look, it looks like we've got our first question coming in now. There's loads and loads of people watching, so I don't know if there's loads of questions coming through, and the producers just picking the best ones. But let's read this in. This is from John Foss. Richard, you said that the power amp is more of a significant part of your tone. What power sections do you use live versus recording? He wants to get into what tubes, is it tubes or solid state? And he then says, thanks and keep rocking. So let's talk about, do you have a power amp preference?
I like 34s, obviously, which is really what I'm running live. I also love KT88s. But yeah, I mean, when I say power amp, I'm not relying as much on an extra preamp tube stage, another 12AX7, which is what a lot of amps do to be a higher gain. So I've got to drive the power amp tubes to reach that level of saturation. It's just a different type of saturation. And it just compresses in a less distorted way.
Do you have to use attenuation when you're live? And if you do, what's your favorite one? Or are you able?
I don't have to use attenuation. I play stadiums. I mean, this is like every kid's dream. I get to play on huge stages. I don't have to attenuate.
I've kind of, I've never played stadiums, but I've been with bands, and the volume on stage is frighteningly quiet. So this idea of, from Zeppelin and Hendrix and Free, literally just going, yeah, that's it. It's as loud as it can go. But
AC/DC.
Yeah. So are you still, the band still pretty comfortable with just going, yeah, everything on 10, don't worry about it?
No, our stage is pretty quiet, but the thing is our amps, we have live cabs behind us.
Yeah.
Or one live cab. And then I have more offstage that are mic'd. And, that's what's great about a big stage. So it can be cranked and mic'd, off stage, and it's not feeding into the vocal mics.
I suppose I'm going to move on to the next question, but I'm always searching for, is there such a thing as an attenuator that genuinely gets the energy of an amp cranked full, but with lower volume then? So if you in the studio, are you able, again, do you just no attenuation, just run everything as loud as it can go and then mic it?
It depends on what it is. If it's a 200 watt high watt, which I unfortunately am very fond of, or much to the chagrin of my family, or 200 watt Park that I have. I have a Park 150 that is an amazing amp. And a lot of times in a scenario like that, I'm going to load half the amp onto an aux, which is a phenomenal box. And then I'll also run a live cab, a 412, and then mic the cab, and I'll also take IRs off the aux.
Yeah.
And then I'll have to time correct them. That's the only downside. But it's really not that hard to time correct.
There was a question that flashed up, and I think it's gone on the screen now, but it was along those lines. Yeah. So another guy, oh my goodness me, I'm going to go with Rostislav. Thank you for watching wherever you're from. And this is basically talking about, do you ever use, plugins or modelers for, whether it's live or in the studio? And if you do, have you got a favorite there?
Yes, I use. It's interesting. I actually use the Axe-Fx quite a bit. But I use it in an unusual way. I always have a real amp mic'd up, whatever amp that may be. I like a lot of different types of amps. So I'll mic an amp, and then I'll also hit the Axe effects, take a stereo out, and I'll have that on either side. Now, I can model two different amps. So I can put one on one side, one on the other, and I just use it to support the main amp. But sometimes I want those options to be able to bring in, you know, an AC 15 on one side and a you know, basement on the other, to support a Marshall in the middle that I'm got mic'd up in the other room. So I do use it to supplement, but I don't really use them exclusively. So I won't use them just a modeled. But I think that, and live I can't. It just doesn't work for me live, because we both Slash and I really rely on our volume knobs. And that's why that triple bleed circuit in my Gretsch is so important to me, because I'm using single channel amps. So I'm constantly adjusting my volume, you know. It's that just intuitive type of thing
And
where you're constantly searching for the perfect spot, and you know, you want a little bit more, you just do, because there's so much tone in your volume knob, and there's so much ground you can cover if your guitar's set up properly. You know, if the pickups are not super high output and they're responsive, and you have, you know, the correct volume pot, and you can, you know, adjust. There's just so much there. And it's a bit old school of me, but that's it's what I found works best for me and for the band. I mean, that's just sort of the nature of GNR.
And I think there's an element of, as good as, you know, digital alternatives have become, there's an element of, you know, it is ultimately ones and zeros, you know, making a sound. And there's something, as you say, with just a slammed valve amplifier and every nuance from your fingers and from a volume controller and everything, there's just way more, you know, shades of gray in between zero and full than maybe there is.
And that's really what we're all about, is the shades of gray. I mean, if you watch live footage or anything of us, we're constantly on our volume knobs, both of us. And it, you know, if I was doing a gig where I just needed to be wide open all the time, and I had my super heavy sound, and then I needed to go to a completely clean sound, you know, a modeling amp would work great. But for what we do, it's I just find it's so much more organic sounding to my ears. And I love, you know, one of my favorite clean sounds, like when I'm recording, I always will go for a cranked amp and then back the volume down on my guitar, because to me, because you get that natural compression, and it's just that, to me, that's a great clean sound.
Well, we've got another question coming in, and I don't know if you know him or seen any of his music, but another fantastic guitar player called Chris Buck, who has just asked a question.
I am a big Chris Buck fan. I mean, he knows it too.
Oh, well, look, it's great that Chris is watching. He's he is definitely one of the most talented British guitar players that I know, for sure.
He's one of the most talented guitar players I've heard.
Full stop. Well, anyway, he wants to know, are there any guitar purchases left on the bucket list, or are there too many to mention?
Well, Chris, I'm actually in the process of selling or getting ready to sell off a big lot of my collection, my vintage collection. And I mean, we're talking like 200 pieces. Okay, so I needed to clear room, but basically I want to buy a burst. So I'm sort of reinvesting, put it that way.
Okay, so you want to buy a burst, you accept that, you know, those kind of the pristine ones are going for $500,000 plus. Is that an investment opportunity for you? Or are you just saying this as like, if you want to, you know, if you want to buy a guitar that you just guarantee is going to be a nice little earner from your pension fund, Or is that a, you know, is it the draw of the tone of, you know, surely Slash has got one he can get you, hasn't he?
He's got a few, yeah. But so the answer to your question is yes.
Yes, to all of those things.
To all of it, yeah, because it is an investment. I mean, I've got a lot of money that, you know, I've been collecting these guitars since I was a kid, right? So I've got a lot of money invested in gear. I love amplifiers, I love guitars, but I find myself, especially being home this last year, I find myself really going back to, I've got my dozen guitars that I go back to every time, right? I've got, you know, my favorite Strat, my favorite Junior, my 53 Gold Top, my 60 Dot Neck, you know, so it's basically like those, and it's not so much about, like, I've got my signature Gretsch, I've got the 6120, I've got a 62 Jazzmaster, but then I also have a Leo Scala guitar over here that or a James Trussard too, a Strat, that, you know, those are the ones I go back to over and over again. So I found myself sitting on a lot of great guitars that I'm not using that much, you know. So I don't need 6 Juniors, you know, 50s Juniors, though I love them. That's sort of where I was, and I'm like, man, what am I doing? Like, I got all this stuff, and same with amps. Like, I've got my favorite Marshalls, you know, I've got my Park, my High Watt, my favorite, you know, and I've got multiples of everything. So, you know, that's basically where I'm at. So yes, Chris Buck, that's my, it's, you know, a burst is, and I played one, you know, I've played a bunch of them, but I played this one and I was like, oh my God, this is it. It's just the greatest sounding.
Well, don't
Les
tell
Paul I've heard.
anybody, don't tell anyone which one it was that you like, because they'll just put the price up by $50,000. So
yeah, no, I've already secured it.
Oh, you have? Oh, so now you've got to sell the other 200 to pay back the loan. But so look, we got another question from our very own Danish Pete coming in here. Is there one out of, I mean, by the sounds of things, not many guitars have got away from you over the years if you've managed to accrue 200 or so, but was there one that got away? And if there was, what was it?
Oh yeah, quite a few. I mean, when you're collecting, you know, there's a lot of times when stuff, you know, you like jonesing for something and you try and buy it and somebody already bought it, or it's just you can't justify the price, or, you know. So yeah, you know, recently there was a J200 with a like mandolin headstock. They only made 2 of them. And it was local here. It was local here in town, and I tried to buy it, and somebody else bought it, and it was at a price where I just, you know, it's not worth it to me.
I can't imagine what any old Gibson, Gretsch, Fender, whatever guitar, if only 2 of them were ever made, I cannot imagine what kind of sums of money things like that would go for, just for, you know, because they're unusual.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh. And there comes a point where you're like, do I really need that? Like, I've got a 50s J200 that I'm keeping, but I don't need another one, you know. It was just more about the collectability. So I'm sort of letting go of a lot of that collectible.
What is there some sort of, are you doing one of these big sort of reverb style, you know, Richard Fortus sales, or are you just?
I'm actually doing it through a store here, here in the U.S. called Chicago Music Exchange.
Oh, well, of course we know the guys at Chicago Music Exchange really well. So that's superb. So they'll just be taking your guitars, and if anybody's interested, they can check them out there. Check them out on their website.
Yeah, my guitars and amps. A lot of amps.
What was the hardest one? What was the one that you just went, shall I, shan't I? And then you just went,
you know, what was the hardest okay, there's quite a few that are tough. there's an amp that I have had for, God, almost 20 years now, like right after I joined GNR. I bought an amp from Mick Mars that he used, that was his main amp. It was I went over to his house and played through a bunch of Jose modded Marshalls, vintage Marshalls, and I plugged into this one, and it just, you know, the clouds parted and the angels sang and the light shone down on the amp, and that was my main amp for many years, live and in studio, and it's one of the greatest sounding Marshalls I've heard. I've got another one that's cloned to it that's very similar, so I'm keeping one of those, but right now that amp is in Chicago. And yeah, you know what though, I set the prices at a point where if it sells, okay, and if it doesn't, I'm okay with that too.
Well, that's very, very sensible of you. I like it. Well, look, I think we're coming into the last 5 minutes or so of this takeover. So if there's any more, or certainly our interview on the takeover, so if there's any more questions, we better get them in now. But what can we expect to see? You know, are the band planning on touring again this year, or is it still all very up in the air?
It's real up in the air. I mean, we've got dates booked in Europe for the summer, and we're just waiting to hear what's going to happen, you know?
Yeah.
But I am fully immunized.
Oh, well done, you. Excellent. Oh, congratulations.
Yeah, I'm excited about that.
Okay, so we do have the eagle-eyed Felipe has noticed that you've moved the selector switch on your Gretsch signature guitar. So is that as a result of, you know, massive windmill style and smashing? Because I mean, if there's one thing on a Gretsch guitar you're never short of, it's knobs and switches. So do you sort of, have you broken a few, or just decided that you just want to simplify it?
I have broken my thumb more than once. This bone right here, and yeah,
doing a windmill. You've broken
not
it
doing a windmill, not doing a windmill, no. but more just being aggressive. And if you hang your guitar low, it's, you know, as you're, yeah. So that's why I move. And plus, I'm always hitting it. So I do the same thing with Les Pauls. When I play Les Pauls, I'm always I get rid of the toggle switch for guitars that I'm using live.
That is some. What did you just play through the pain? Was that middle of a gig? You bust your thumb? And...
Yeah. It's not the gig that it happens on that's hard. It's the next gig.
Because that's the Dave Grohl thing, isn't it? When he bust his leg, and he said like actually adrenaline he just came back on stage and just adrenaline. So you were the same. The adrenaline just gets you through the gig, but the minute you finish, you think, oh man, that was a mistake.
Yeah, when your hand's all swollen, and yeah. It's, you know, Axl did the same thing when he fell. When we were doing this little club gig at the Troubadour in LA, and he fell back, broke his leg, broke his foot. And he finished the gig. I mean, but he actually said, he turned to me, he said, man, I think I just broke my foot. But he carried on. That was like 3 songs in or something like that. And he finished the gig and then went straight to the hospital. And it's the same. I mean, you know, like I said, it's the next gig that's bad.
And anything else happening, you know, this year that Guns fans might want to know about, or that you're
sure, lots of stuff, but I can't talk about it.
It's just still top secret, is it? Fair enough. I thought,
but man, I'm sure hoping those shows in Europe.
Oh, I lost you just at the end there. Hoping.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, I'm hoping that the shows happen in Europe for this summer.
Oh well. Who knows? I must admit, for everybody over here watching the news, it's yeah, I think up in the air is probably the best way to describe it. But well, look, man, I mean, it's been an absolute pleasure chatting to you. I cannot wait to see that Gretsch guitar. I'm totally. Have you got some sort of exclusive patent on that the tortoiseshell pick guard, or is that? Because I mean,
no, I wish I did, but no.
I'm definitely going to.
No, but I'm super excited about this guitar. There's a lot of things about it that are really special, and like I said, we put a lot of time into it, and they have been incredibly patient and as tenacious as I have been.
Well, I would love to, if we ever get the chance, you know, if you're in the UK and we get the chance to come and see you and take a look at the guitar and maybe play it on our YouTube channel or something, that would be awesome.
That'd be great.
Oh man, it'd be so cool. So yeah, look, I'm assuming that someone here will cut back in, but or we'll just be left awkwardly going, thank you very much for coming on. But look, have a great day, man. I really appreciate it. Thank you very much for everyone who's watching. There's tons of Gretsch videos going up on the Andertons YouTube channel today, so covering all the new 2021 stuff. So yes, Richard, thank you so much for spending the morning with us, or the afternoon over here. Thank you very much. And I assume somebody will press a button and we'll fade into obscurity. Here's Adam back. Yes. Thanks, man. I love this technology. It's like being on the Eurovision Song Contest or something and just trying to connect with the judge from Lithuania and whether it'll actually happen.
Yeah, just like the Eurovision Song Contest. It's it's a new experience for me for sure. Well, that was good fun. He's a guitar nerd like the rest of us, isn't he?
I love it, man. I love it that people, whether they're in, you know, Guns N' Roses or in the first little pub band they've ever joined, they've all got something in common. Just, you know, they love a good guitar. They love turning up Marshall amplifiers till they make your ears bleed. And
yeah, not an attenuator fan.
Yeah, again, it's always, I mean, wouldn't that be great? If I liked the response. I like the response. I play stadiums. Fair play. But no, it's all cool. It's all cool. He was really, really lovely guy. So yeah, hopefully we'll catch up with him another time later this year and get to actually play his guitar, because that did look awesome. So what have you got left for the rest of the evening then, Adam?
Well, we're just going to, I think Jason's going to come back in a moment, and we're going to see if there's any outstanding questions to answer, and then I'm going to have a nice glass of wine.
Well, look, it's good to see you, man.
Thank you so much for having us.
No,
today.
Not at all. Thank you for agreeing to take over, and thanks to the mysteriously anonymous Helen, who works ever so hard to put these things together and then refuses to ever be on camera. But Helen, amazing job again. Thank you so much. So, right, I'm out of here, I guess. Someone's pressing my button to delete me, I think. Bye!
All right, well, that was Richard Fortus and the captain, and I think we're going to get Jason back now. That was pretty cool, huh, Jason?
Yeah, no, guitars, man. Guitars, amps, hundreds of them. It's great. That's what we do.
Attenuators in sight. Excellent.
He's got me thinking Park 150 now. Gosh, when he said that. All right, I'm not supposed to spend any more money on stuff, but man, he's got me thinking. Anyway.
Yeah, I think the same effect has been had on many of the viewers today. I've seen a few comments where they needed to go to the bank for their next purchase, thanks to what he was talking about there. But,
have you ever seen, he's posted his 58 country gent. Have you ever seen it?
I think on Instagram, I think I've seen.
It's sick. It's that faded walnut that you and I really, really like. Like it's a good one. We probably should borrow it.
Or maybe that's going into that Chicago Music Exchange thing. Maybe we should buy it.
Send text or something. But no, man, he's got such cool stuff, and obviously, if you've ever heard him play, he's unbelievable. Makes every one of them sound great. So if anyone deserves what he's after, he's the guy. Amazing player.
Indeed. Cool. So shall we, I don't know if there's nobody's dragged any questions onto the screen yet. So I see one, Donnie Brook asking about the Tri-5s. The answer to that is, if you're in the UK, I believe they're just arriving into shops over the next couple of weeks, the first batches. Very limited edition though, so you have to be quick. I have been waiting. Jason, that's probably for you. Stefan says, I've been waiting for a Seafoam. Oh, it's gone. A Seafoam turquoise 6118 for a year. Will you ever make one?
Well, Stefan, there are two colors to an anniversary. So what's the other side?
Good answer.
That's actually close enough to what we do with the smoke green. It might not be bad.
Is it seafoam green or turquoise though?
Stranger things have happened.
Indeed. Yeah, well, I think the questions were mainly for Richard just recently, so I think we're probably covered. Is there any final thoughts, Jason, for today? Jerry style, Jerry Springer style?
Not really, man. Just it was great to be here. I appreciate everybody tuning in. Obviously, Anderton's letting us hijack the bandwidth and airwaves to proselytize, or at least, if anything, just to talk about guitars, which is what we love to do. I'm hoping everybody at least picked up some stuff or has some records to listen to after hearing us chat about some of these deep tracks and things like that. Give it a shot. Listen to it. If you don't own a Gretsch, I recommend you try it. It will not be your last one. You got to have one, and it's an experience. It's somewhat of a rite of passage. I think that's how you and I understood it. Like, even before we joined the brand, it's just we played it, we loved it, and it became a love affair. And fortunately, we're able to push things forward. But if you don't have one, get one. Streamliner, Electromatic, Pro, whatever you can get your hands on, plug one in. It really will change what you're up to.
Sure will. And just to close, Stefan suggests bronze for that second color. So jot that down in your ideas book.
I'm all right with that.
All right. Well, I think we can probably wrap things up. It's been a long day, but it's been a great day at the Gretsch Takeover for Andertons here. Thanks to Lee, the captain, and to Danish Pete. Thanks to Richard Fortus, of course. Thanks to Rabea Massaad for joining us earlier. Thank you, Jason, for spending the time with us. And I think it's time to go and get a quiet libation after this hours of online streaming in these crazy lockdown times. So everyone out there, stay safe, and see you next time.
All right. Thanks, everybody.